How about them apples?
You get it?
Are you on your computer or to the RSS 2000?
Yes, I am.
Do you look down at the bottom on that, see if you can see the little button to pause it there?
I've got a button to start it to recording. It's not the pause button yet. The recording has not started.
Well, okay, just watch. Are you on live streaming at the bottom?
Yes, now we're recording and I have the pause button on the left.
Okay, well, good to see all of you here today. Let me start with a little preview of coming attractions. Today we're going to talk about, from about the middle of Revelation 16 down through the end of the book, chapter 22. I'm going to hand out to you today before you leave a sheet that shows the chart of the premillennial view. So you can get, I'm going to ask you to draw that on the final. Okay? We're going to spend a lot of time explaining it tomorrow, but I thought maybe if you could have had a chance to look it over a little tonight, it might help you a little bit to get it in mind. And then tomorrow we'll start at 2 as usual, and we'll go until about a little before 5. Then I'm going to give you a little longer break than usual in case you want to look over some things a little bit before we start to take the test. So I'll give you a little bit of a kind of collect our break more all at once tomorrow and so on, so that you'll have a little time to refresh your minds, your memories before we take the test about, I think we've got it scheduled at 5 to 6. I thought last time I was here we needed to end a little early on Friday night because of evening activities. I don't think that's true this time, but we'll still get through a little early on Friday. I don't think anybody will have serious objection to that.
Graduation banquet?
Yeah, we do have the banquet.
Oh, you do have a banquet?
Yeah.
And what time does it start?
6:30.
6:30.
Yes, sir.
Well, do we need to move up a little? Will 30 minutes give you long enough? Well, we'll be sure you get fully that, and maybe a little more if we can work that out. Okay. Okay. So that's kind of our schedule. Remember that you need to be preparing a paper for me tomorrow, hand in tomorrow, that tells the storyline of the book. What we have said this week is that there are 2 levels involved in Revelation, as with all figurative language, symbolism. There's what it says, and then there's what it means. So I'm asking you to sort of tell me the story of the bottom line. What does it mean? Now you'll make some reference to this upper line. You'll say, well, the 4 horsemen suggest, and then you'll tell what they suggest. But you'll basically be telling what the true storyline of the book is. And also that will be on the test. I'll ask you to do that on the test. Anyway, bring your Bibles to use on the test, but not notes. That means don't bring a Bible with a lot of notes in it, okay? If you got some minor thing in the margins, okay? But just, so you can use your Bibles on the exam, but not notes that you've taken. So that'll be on the exam tomorrow. I'm planning to have some time when we get through today for questions. So if you've got some questions that you've wondered, well, is he going to talk about this, or have we covered that, or we missed it as we went through, or whatever, why, we're going to have a half an hour or so for questions when we get through today. So be sort of thinking about things you might like to ask as we finish up today. Okay. I believe we're ready to start now, and let me kind of review where we are. One of the key things in studying Revelation, as with anything in the Bible, is you've got to kind of be sure of the context. So let's kind of set our context a little bit. We said that chapter 12 begins the second act, the second half of the book. The first act ended with great joy in heaven in chapter 11, when the announcement comes of the fall. And then in chapter 12 we sort of start, and we're introduced to kind of a new set of characters and things. Still, and there's a little overlap between Act 1 and Act 2. That 42 months, 1206 days, 3.5 years appears at the end of Act 1 and the beginning of Act 2. See, so they overlap a little bit. So that occurs in chapter 11, occurs again in chapter 12 and 13, and so there's a little bit of overlap you see there. Chapter 12 and Act 2 begin with the introduction of the woman. We've identified as the plan of God in this personified, glorious form. She gives birth to Christ. Satan is mounting his attacks. He attacks Christ on earth when he's born and fails. He attacks Christ in heaven to keep him from taking his place as King and Savior. Chapter 9 and verse 12 says that because Satan has been cast down, now has come the kingdom and the salvation and all these things. Because Satan was what he was trying to prevent, he didn't prevent, so it's here. And so he failed in that attack. Then he turned his attention against the third attack was on the woman. And God gives her wings, and she flies out of the wilderness so Satan can't get her. And so, no, you can't mess with the plan, Satan. You can't fool with the plan. That's going into effect, and you can't stop that. And then the fourth attack Satan mounts is against those who are the children of the woman, those who hold the testimony of Jesus. And so that would be Christians. And so Satan is going to mount his attack, his fourth attack, which is the attack the book of Revelation is really all about. He mounts that attack against the children, the seed of the woman, and is going to persecute them. And his idea is, if I can get rid of all the Christians, it won't matter that I lost round 1, 2, and 3. If I win round 4, I win. And of course that wouldn't be true, would it? So, to help him in this attack, he brings up two beasts, two allies, pictured as beasts. We've identified those as the Roman Empire and the cult of temple worship. And they mount this attack against the church for 42 months. And the basis of the attack is that emperor worship has become a big thing. And because it has become such a big thing, Christians are now faced with a choice of whether they're going to participate in it or not. And if they refuse, then they'll be persecuted and killed and tortured and jailed and all kinds of things. And if they do participate in it, then they've denied their faith. And so Satan thinks he wins either way. And so he mounts this attack using the Roman Empire, and the stimulus for the Roman Empire not to like the church is they won't take part in emperor worship. You see, those who worshipped, Neptune or Jupiter or anybody else says, well, just add one more, the emperor. That's no big deal. See, so it wasn't a big deal to them. They had a whole pantheon of gods already. See, so what's one more or a few more? It doesn't matter. But to Christians, not that way. So, when we come to the end of chapter 13, then we've come to the end of this persecution period. Now, I hope your ears are alert. What am I doing right now?
Telling the story.
I'm doing what I want you to do. That's exactly right. See, what I'm doing right now is what I want you to put in your paper. Something like that. See. So here comes chapter 14, and we have the 144,000, the Christians who were on earth, about to be persecuted, have not gone through the persecution, and now they're in heaven on Mount Zion, following the Lamb wherever he goes. sing the song, nobody can sing but them. And so, this time that God said back in chapter 6, verse 9, wait, time's going to have to elapse before I make my move. Now comes the moment when he says, I'm announcing the time has come. Babylon's fallen, and the reaper has gone forth, and all these figures for how something is about to be cut down, whose code name is Babylon. So, chapter 15 shows those who were martyred by the beast standing around the sea, singing the song of Moses and the Lamb, and they call those who came off victorious over the beast. And then we come to chapter 16. Chapter 16 begins to reveal how God is going to bring the beast down. How is he going to bring an end to the Roman Empire? And we've got here on the board a little demonstration of the first 6 bowls. First 6 bowls. So, bowls 1, 2, 3, and 4 all deal with nature. First bowl is poured out on the land, and those who are the followers of the beast break out in grievous sword. Number 2, poured out on the seas, and everything in them dies. Number 3 is poured out on the rivers, and they turn to blood, and those standing by say, that's good enough. They shed the blood of the saints, and now they have to suffer the consequences. And the 4th bowl is poured out on the sun, and it gets very hot, and then blaspheme God. And so we've got land, sea, rivers, and sky again. God is going to use the forces of nature as one means to bring the Roman Empire down to defeat. So the first 4 are about nature and how he will use nature. The 5th bowl is poured out on the throne of the beast. The throne of the beast. And turns it dark. Turns it dark. Well, that suggests when the leadership of a nation becomes darkened, that means darkened with immorality, darkened with corruption, all these things. And so Rome is going to suffer the consequences of the immorality, corruption of its leadership, which has become dark. And one of the major forces in its fall will be the consequences of the immoral practices of leadership and consequently the others in the empire. So its immorality is going to be a factor in its fall. Then the 6th bowl is poured out on the Euphrates River and dries it up. Why does it dry up the Euphrates River? What does that mean? Somebody tell me.
Outside armies.
Outside armies can come because that represents Rome's eastern border. So here come the outside attacks, and from that outside attacks, the Goths, the Visigoths, the Huns, and the Vandals, all these tribes come in and attack Rome, and that was indeed one of the major forces that led to its fall. And so in the first 12 verses of chapter 16, we have an outline of the means God will use to bring the empire down to defeat. Now, those link back to the trumpets. You remember that? First 4 trumpets were about land, sea, river, and sky. Only then it was the 3rd. Now it's full. The 5th trumpet was an unleashing of the locusts, evil against itself, parallel to the only for 5 months, you see, a limited way. And so here we have the darkening of the throne of the beast, both of those suggesting immorality. And the first as a warning, the consequences are a warning, and then they are a means to the fall. And the 6th trumpet was blown, and there were 200 million soldiers at the Euphrates. Now the Euphrates dries up. You see how the parallel. So the means of warning now become the means of defeat. Okay, that ought to make those pretty easy to remember, you know, if you put them in that parallel sequence there. So we have then that. Now, when we come to verse 13 of chapter 16, which is where we started, where we stopped yesterday, we have an interlude. Remember, between the 6th and 7th seals, the 6th and 7th trumpets, there was an interlude. Now between the 6th and 7th bowls, we have another interlude. And what happens during this interlude? Okay, that's where we're picking up our story today. Okay. In the interlude, the dragon, and the first beast and the second beast send frogs out of their mouths. I wish I had a movie of this, okay? I mean, this would be really fun to watch, wouldn't it? A dragon with 7 heads, and a beast with 7 heads, and another beast, also called the false prophet, send frogs out of their mouths. And to whom are they sending the frogs? Kings of the earth. And they gather these kings at a place called
Armageddon.
Boy, it's just got just a fierce ring sounding to it. Armageddon. Scary. Now, what is this about? They gather the kings to a place called Armageddon. Well, there are some things I think we can see in this that will help us to grasp what it's all about. The word Megiddo, Armageddon, seems to have some connection with the hill of Megiddo in Israel. Megiddo is a hill beside the valley of Jezreel. It was a hill not too far from Mount Carmel, where Elijah met the prophets of Baal. It was a military outpost. Solomon had put chariots there. Other of the rulers of Israel put soldiers there as an outpost. It was kind of a military outpost beside the valley of Jezreel. Now, that location, the hill of Megiddo and the valley of Jezreel, were the location of many famous battles of the Bible times. Let me just run through some of those for you. The valley of Jezreel is where Deborah defeated Sisera in the valley of Jezreel. Now that's where Gideon defeated the Midianites, the valley of Jezreel. Now that's where Saul and Jonathan fought the Philistines and died with their own hands or somebody's hands after the battle. So they fought the Philistines there. Critical battle in the history of Israel. It's where King Ahaziah and King Josiah died after battles, or in those battles. So Armageddon is a famous battlefield. The hill of Megiddo and the corresponding valley of Jezreel are a famous battlefield. Famous for decisive battles. Famous for last-ditch stands. Famous for people saying, here's going to be the climactic struggle that we're in, here in the valley of Jezreel. Okay. I'm suggesting to you that the use of Armageddon in this way is a way of suggesting that another decisive struggle, that there's a desire for another decisive struggle. You see, it's like this. Have I mentioned that before? It says Armageddon. What does it mean? What does it mean? Well, have you ever heard the expression, somebody met his Waterloo? Anybody, what does that mean, you meet your Waterloo?
Yeah.
Huh? What does that mean?
It's over.
It's over. Go down to defeat like Napoleon did at Waterloo. The term Waterloo, the battlefield Waterloo, has become synonymous with defeat. It's a figurative use of a battlefield to mean defeat. Well, what country is Waterloo in?
Belgium.
That's exactly right. It's in Belgium. It's in Belgium. You have to go to Belgium to meet your Waterloo? Well, I've known some football teams that met your Waterloo right not far from here, you know. No, you can meet your Waterloo in the figurative sense anywhere. If you go down to defeat, you met your Waterloo. So, Armageddon, you can have an Armageddon-like fight without going Armageddon. It's a reference that has symbolic meaning. Now, let's make then the conclusion that Armageddon then is symbolic of making a last stand. What is it that's going on here? Okay, here are, let me suggest 4 things about understanding Armageddon. First of all, the passage is symbolic. It says there's a dragon. Is the dragon symbolic of something? What's the dragon symbolic of? Satan. It says there's a beast. Is the beast symbolic? Is it symbolic of Roman Empire? It says there's a second beast, or false prophet, he's sometimes called. Has 2 horns like a lamb. Is he symbolic? Yes. It mentions frogs. Do you suppose that's symbolic? Or are they real frogs that come out of the mouth of a dragon? That's more symbolism. Well, if the dragon is the symbol, the beast is the symbol, the second beast is the symbol, the frogs are a symbol, wouldn't you think that Armageddon might be symbolic? So I'm suggesting to you that the context clearly indicates that we're in symbolic territory. Okay? We're in symbolic territory. Now, the second thing I would suggest to you is that whatever this is, it has to fit the Revelation timetable. Remember we talked about that the other day? First chapter, first verse, it's about things that are going to happen shortly. Chapter 1, verse 3, it's going to happen soon. Many places it says, I come quickly to do what I've set out in this book I will do. Revelation, the timetable for the main thrust of the meaning of the book of Revelation is that it's about things that are going to start soon and play out in a relatively short span of time. Or whatever Armageddon is, it has to fit that. And so, whatever meaning we give to it, it must be a meaning that comes within this, that would fit words like soon, quickly, shortly, things like that. Now, we haven't come to say what it is yet, but it has to fit that time frame, or else we aren't looking at what the book says about itself. Okay? Now, here's the third thing that I'd suggest for what we're talking about. It has to fit the storyline of the book of Revelation. We're in chapter 16, starting in verse 13. So we've got to ask, where did the first 15 chapters lead us? Where are we in the story? Well, in the first part of chapter 16, verses 1 to 12, we're at the point of the story when God is about to destroy the Roman Empire. He's set the forces in motion to do it. The natural disasters, the effects of its immorality, the beginning of the incursions of the forces from outside. These things are beginning to happen now and are beginning to come to where they're having a major impact. And at that point, the dragon, Satan, and the 2 beasts, the Roman Empire and the cult of worship, get together and say, hey, let's make a stand. Let's don't let this happen. Let's these things are forces are moving. Let's put a stop to that. Let's make a last-ditch stand like people used to do at Armageddon. Let's stand like they did. Doesn't mean let's all go over to the hill of Megiddo and have a fight. It means let's make a last-ditch stand like people used to do in the valley of Jezreel alongside the hill of Megiddo. Because Satan has laid a lot on this. I mean, this is a big-time deal for Satan, isn't it? I mean, he's invested a lot in using the Roman Empire to defeat the church. And now he begins to see that instead of defeating the church, the Roman Empire is about to get defeated. And he says, hey, let's rally our forces here. Let's gather our kings. Let's get all of the people, the sub-kings of the empire. Let's rally and let's fight, and let's don't let these things draw us down. Let's keep it going so we can defeat the church. So that's where we are in the storyline of the book of Revelation. At the point at which God has set in motion the forces to bring the Roman Empire down to defeat, and Satan and his two allies say, we're not going down without a fight. A fight like people used to do at the Valley of Jezreel alongside the Hill of Megiddo. Okay. Now, if you see that this is figured, if you see it must fit within the timetable of the book of Revelation, and you see it must fit the storyline of the book of Revelation, it's not hard to figure out what this means, is it? Well, let me add a number 4 to this. Number 4 is, well, that's part of the number 3. As the forces work to bring Rome down, Satan, Rome, and the cult resist. Now here comes number 4. There is nothing in this passage about the end of the world. We're not in end of the world territory in chapter 16. This is not dealing with what's going to happen at the end of the world. It's not talking about Christ's second coming. It's not talking about anything like that. It's talking about the fall of the Roman Empire. That's where we are in the story. And so to interpose into this, that Armageddon, the use of the word Armageddon, this is the only place in the Bible the word's used. To interpose into this chapter 16, into the world stuff, well, that's not what the story is about. In my mind, in my understanding, is a grievous error. We're not talking here about end of the world. We're talking about end of something, Roman Empire, but we're not talking about end of the world. Okay? So, people, it is amazing how widespread is the assumption that Armageddon means something about the end of the world. I mean, politicians use it, people use it in literature, it's everywhere. It's about the end of the world. It's going to be this, that the world is going to end with this great cataclysmic war. Does the Bible say that the world is going to end in a great war? I think you know the answer to that. I'm going to let you fill in the blank, okay? The most common expression about the return of Jesus Christ is that he will come like a thief in the night. What does that mean, he'll come like a thief in the night?
Unexpected.
Unexpected. Well, if we're having major World War III as a prelude, it wouldn't be unexpected, would it? So, when I had an earlier book called Armageddon Again, and then when I revised it, I called it Like a Thief in the Night. To emphasize the idea that the most frequently used expression about Christ's return is he comes like a thief in the night. And in my mind, in my little simple mind, that shoots the theory about all this stuff at the end all to pieces. I mean, think for a moment, we're going to talk about this tomorrow, but think about it for a minute, that those who hold the premillennial view, as proposed by Hal Lindsey and others, they wouldn't all agree on every detail of that, but as he presents it, say there's going to be a rapture right here, and exactly 7 years later, Christ is going to return. So we have a 7-year warning. The thieves give you a 7-year warning? My house has been robbed 4 times. And that thief never called me in advance. He never said when the moon is full, and when you get 3 phone calls and nobody's on the other end of the line, that's the day I'm coming. He never did that. Why? Thieves don't do that. If come like the thief in the night means anything, it means, what's the word? You said it. Unexpected. Now, if there's a great World War III, as Lindsay describes, with with atomic bombs going off and 300 million soldiers gathering in Israel and all this stuff. What's unexpected about it? It's 7 years, I guess, to the day from the rapture till Jesus returns, in their view. So, I believe it is a serious error to take this passage in Revelation 16 and consider it to be about the end of the world. I just don't believe we're in end of the world territory at all. Right here. Now we'll get to that as we come to the very end of the book. After we've done with the main theme of the book about the fall of the Roman Empire, after that's over, he's going to give us a little epilogue about what happens after that. But the main thrust of the book is God is going to take care of his people, and then he's going to take care of the Roman Empire. Okay. Now, after that segment about gathering the kings at Armageddon, that is, rallying our forces so we don't go down to defeat, then the seventh bowl is poured out. And I guess we're, in verse 18 or something, chapter 6. The seventh bowl is poured out, and a voice from the throne said, "It is done." And the city breaks in pieces, and there's all these earthquakes and stuff, and it's all over. How much good did it do Satan and his two allies to resist the forces that God set in motion? Do them any good? It is done. If I were doing this in Texas, I would say that means that's all she wrote, "Dear John, I've sent your saddle home." But people in Colorado probably don't understand what that means. Okay, it is done. And the city breaks in pieces, and there's an earthquake, and all these things happen. Babylon, code name for Rome, given the wrath that she deserves. And so all this happens with the seventh bowl being poured out. Now go back to the board a minute. I think it'll help you. You know, in my book, Unlocking Revelation, I've got these little drawings. And when I preach on this, that call is to tell me when Jim Wilson got his PhD degree from the University of Oklahoma. Unfortunately, the call came a little late. So I'll call her back after a while. I've got these little drawings in my book. Somebody got a copy of that book with you? Anybody got? Let me hold it up here and show. See, here's the drawing of the harlot sitting on the back of the beast, and here's the rider on the white horse, and stuff like that. These are little sketches. Here's the one with the bowls. You see what I've got on the board up there, the bowls like that. Now, when I do this, when I preach this, I have felt figures like that. Those are copies of my felt figures. When I started doing this series back in 1975, I pondered this question. That was before PowerPoint, so I used an overhead projector. And I kept pondering the question, how can I give people the sequence of things that you can give them on the overhead projector and keep before them the big picture all the time? How can you hold the big picture and then give these specifics as you go along? If it's all on the overhead projector, you got to take this one off and give the other and then put it back on and all that stuff. So I said, okay, I'm going to use two things. And so I've got a flannel board, and I nearly did it that way. In fact, I requested the board. Did you get the board for me? So he had a 4x8 big ply board for me, which I put, in the front of the church building and covered it with a black cloth. And then I have all of these pictures in there are in little felt, cut out felts with colors, you know. It's a red dragon, and it's a red beast, and it's a woman that's purple, and, you know, all this stuff. So it's just little cutout things that, and these, I've got a big bowl and strings that go down. And here, this string goes down to a big ugly looking sword. And this string goes down to a big red thing for the seas turn red. And here goes one that looks kind of like a river that turns to red. And here's one that has the sun is getting hot. And over here is the throne of the beast. And over here is a brown looking river because it's dried up, you see. And over here it says some stuff for Armageddon. And then over here it says it is done. So I use those and I put them on the flannel board over here. And that stays up for the whole sermon, see. And then in the PowerPoint, I'm walking through this thing, so they get the pieces over here. But all the time, I keep referring them back to the big picture. And I think that is so important for us to do as we look at Revelation, is to keep in mind the big picture. If you lose where you are in the big picture, you're going to get messed up in Revelation. So my way of doing that, when I deliver this sermon in churches, which of course is a shorter version than we're getting this class, but then I use that flannel board to hold the big thing before them while I talk about the playbook. So those pictures, so if you wanted to do that, you could make some cutouts of things, of horses and whatever, you know, and put them up on the board and refer to them and have people see those, and then you go through the table. So we now see that we finished the sixth, with the seventh bowl being poured out. Now, could the book of Revelation end right here and have told the whole story? Really kind of could, couldn't it? I mean, the persecution is over, the church survives, and the Roman Empire is going down to defeat. That's really what this story is about. And so, when we come to the end of chapter 16, we've really seen the essence of the story. Now, chapters 17, 18, and 19 are a recap of what has already been told, with more details. We're going to see 17, 18, and 19 just give a little more detail. 17 and 18, chapter 19 rather, chapter 19, verse 19 ends with the defeat of Rome being cast into the lake of fire. You see, well, that's the same thing as it's done and it's broken into pieces. So we're now going to have 3 chapters that give us more detail about Rome and its fall and those things. And so we're going to see that with more elaboration here. But the end of 16 and the end of 19 are the same point in time. Same point in time. Okay? So here we go with the chapter 17. Okay. Now, we're going to look at 17 through 19, which is a review with more details. And so we'll kind of see how that works. We're introduced now to a harlot, a woman called the great harlot or the great prostitute, depending on what translation you're using. And so there are some clues. We saw these at the beginning and in our first lesson, and we're going to see them again. The clues given for her are first that she is the great city that rules over the world, over the kings of the world. The previous verse says she rules over tribes and tongues and people and nations, the same expressions that were given to the beast. She rides on the beast. What does it mean she rides on the beast? What does a rider on the horse do? Controls the horse. So that she rides on the beast means she controls the beast, and the beast is the Roman Empire, so she is in charge of the Roman Empire. Okay? Then it says that She is dressed luxuriously in scarlet and purple and fine jewels. Well, it said it was the city, chapter 17, verse 18, a city that controls the beast and is luxuriously arrayed. We're narrowing it down pretty fast, aren't we? Narrowing it down pretty fast. Her name is Babylon the Great. She has a headband, it seems, on her head. And on that headband it says, Babylon, mother of harlots. Babylon the Great, mother of harlots. So, Babylon has been used all the way through as a name to refer to to Rome, the city of Rome. Very good word to use. Babylon was a capital city of a great empire. It was the capital of a city of a great empire that persecuted God's people, took them up into captivity, and whatever, and destroyed the city of Jerusalem. And so to talk about what would then have been a present-day persecutor in terms of like a city of a past persecutor would fit very well. And so, and then chapter 17, verse 6 says she has in her hand a cup. And that cup is full of the blood of the saints, and she has been drinking so much of it, she's intoxicated on the blood of the saints. Intoxicated on the blood of the saints. Okay. The clues to identify her then are, she is a great city. She is in charge of the Roman Empire. She is a luxurious, beautiful city. Her code name is Babylon, and she is a great persecutor of the church. Now, as we're going to see in a moment, there are some theories that make this the city of Jerusalem. Well, I have some problems with that. Jerusalem didn't control the Roman Empire. Jerusalem did some persecution of Christians, but nothing like the Roman Empire did. You would hardly call Jerusalem the great city, rules over tribes and tongues and people and nations, and there's not much reason you would call Jerusalem with the name Babylon. So I have a hard time with that, making that the city of Jerusalem. Some make it the Roman Catholic Church. Well, I'm not a fan of the Roman Catholic Church. I don't preach at the Roman Catholic Church. But I don't think that these descriptions fit the Roman Catholic Church. We'll see more of that in a minute. But anyway, those are the clues, and all of them seem clearly to point to the city of Rome. Now, here's one more that is a very interesting thing to me. This is a coin. A coin. We showed you that on Tuesday, I think, the coin. This coin was in circulation in the area of Asia Minor. At the time the book of Revelation was written, you could have found these coins around town. Okay? And it shows a woman sitting on 7 hills, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And her name is Roma. And she is luxuriously arrayed, somewhat in battle dress, I suppose we might say, but nonetheless, reclining on 7 hills, much as the harlot is described. And so to picture Rome as a woman sitting on 7 hills would have been a very well-known expression in those days. Now, here is the drawing that our artist made of a woman sitting on the back of the beast, luxuriously arrayed, a big cup in her hand, filled with the blood of the saints. I was going to tell you the story about that coin. They have one of those coins at the British Museum. The British Museum is one of my favorite places. I would say that of all the museums in the world, the British Museum has more Bible-related items in it than any other museum in the world. Even the museums in Jerusalem don't have things that are as crucial and critical and important, I think, as does the British Museum. Well, the first time I went to the British Museum, I didn't know, I knew there were things there, but I didn't know what they were, and I thought, well, I'll go in there and I can ask somebody, and they'll tell me where it is, and I'd go in and I'd ask, and they'd say, well, we don't know where that is. And so I didn't see very many of the key things I wanted to see because I didn't know my way around and I hadn't done my homework. So I determined that before I went the next time, I was going to do my homework. And there's some good books about Bible-related things in the British Museum and everything. So I did my homework. And I was asked to preach in London, in a small church in London, for a week. And I spent a lot of the time during the day in the British Museum, and then preaching and some other bits and whatever otherwise. So I got well acquainted with the British Museum, and I found where all these objects were. And to help other people find them, I wrote out a summary of what all of these are, and what they mean, and why they're Bible related, and how to find them in the British Museum. And that's on my website. If you ever are going to go over there, you need to get on my website, which is at www.oc.oklahomachristian.edu, and then it's /faculty/Stafford.North, and then that'll take you to my to the menu, www.oc.edu/faculty/Stafford.North, and you look on the menu and it'll say Guide to the British Museum. There's about a 20-page document there that has a picture of these items on it, about 20 of them, and a half-page or so description of each. And at the end is a map that shows you how to track through the museum to see them all. And it is a huge help if you ever go to the British Museum. Now, the coin is not on there. The reason the coin is not on there is because the coin is not for public display. You have to go and make a special request ahead of time to see the coin. So I did that, and I got set, and I had a camera with me, and I took a photo of it. It wasn't a very good camera, and I didn't get a good picture of it. So I'm going to go back through there again, and I got a hold of them, and I say, I want to come and see so I can take a picture of this coin. And the guy sends me that picture by email, which of course is a whole lot better than I would have gotten if I'd been taking it myself. And so when I went to the British Museum, but I didn't have to go up to the coin where all the coins are hidden and find it because I had a great job in the first place. But so many great things there to see. There's one room. There's a room in the British Museum that's not quite as big as this room, maybe about like from here over, that is devoted to the Battle of Lachish. Sennacherib in 701 came against Hezekiah, and he destroyed 47 cities in Judah, or villages, whatever, before he came to Jerusalem. And one of the ones he destroyed in advance was Lachish, which is about 30 miles from Jerusalem. And it was a big city. It had high walls around it and everything. And from Lachish, Sennacherib sends word to Hezekiah saying, I'm going to do the same thing to you I just did to Lachish if you don't surrender. And Isaiah tells him, don't surrender. So what's Hezekiah going to do? So he says, no, I'm not going to surrender. And the Bible tells the story of how the army came over there and God killed 185,000 soldiers in one night, and Sennacherib took his tail between his legs and goes home. Well, when he got home, he was proud of his destruction of Lachish. And so, on in relief on stones. You know how they carve these pictures and all those stones. He carves a picture, a series of pictures of his destruction of Lachish. And here showed the troops coming up, and there are men in rows with bows and arrows, and men with swords and shields, and men with slingshots, which was not a child's toy, it was a weapon, you know. And here are these men, his men coming up, and then here comes the city of Lachish with the high walls around it and everything. And he's made a ramp, and he's got these battering rams. This ram comes up to try to knock a hole in the wall, and the Israelites are throwing down rocks and throwing down torches on the soldiers that are coming up. And then the next panel shows them taking prisoners, these are photographs of 8th century Israelites now, okay? Coming out of this thing, and he's some of the people he captured, he's flaying alive. Others he cutting their heads off. Others mistreating the prisoners, and finally he turned around the corner, and here sits Sennacherib on his throne, enjoying his great success. I mean, so it's a photographic record of that battle, which is covered in 3 different places in the Bible, and 5 chapters of the Bible is given to that battle, or this incursion, not just the Battle of Lachish, but this whole story. And we've got photographs of it in the British Museum. The whole room of photographs. It's amazing. Well, anyway, yes.
Do you know when that was discovered? When?
Yes, it was discovered in the 1800s in the excavations at Nineveh, which is where this was an Assyrian king, Sennacherib, and so he had a big palace there. And this was discovered in the mid-1800s by an archaeologist. His name escapes me right now. And so those things were taken back to the British Museum. And there are lots of other things. I mean, that's just one. That's one of 20 items on my list, okay? That's one of 20. So even if you're not going over there, you might find it fun to read it. But anyway, I got off on that, telling you where the coin came from. Yes?
Can we get a picture of that coin?
The coin?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can email you a picture of it. Sure. Okay. If my computer holds out, I'll do that in the morning. We had trouble with the computer yesterday, and last night when I went back to the room, I couldn't. It was terrible. And I left it on, and overnight it shut itself off, and when I got up this morning, it all worked fine. So I don't know what's going on, but anyway. Wayne let me use his again today, just in case we had a problem. Okay, here's the picture of the harlot. Let's move on. And so here is she is arrayed luxuriously riding on the back of the beast, and we have interpreted her as the city of Rome. Now, here's a little bit of what we just said about the city of harlots, the city of Rome. Now, I want us to stop now and look at our columns, our 5 columns, and kind of catch up with where we are. You want to look at the sheet that says 6th bowl. Let's go to 6th bowl, and after that is Armageddon. Well, it's kind of hard to find your place in there, but you find the place for the 1st bowl, 2nd bowl, 3rd bowl, 4th bowl. Then you come to one that the top of the sheet says 5th bowl and 6th bowl, and then the middle of the sheet is Armageddon. Everybody with us now? Okay. Hines says Armageddon represents the last decisive victory of good over evil. The last decisive victory of good over evil. Kind of interesting, the last decisive victory of good over evil, but the 7th bowl, he says, represents the overthrow of the papal power. Well, it sounds like he makes Armageddon the end of everything, and then it keeps going on, doesn't it? So, anyway, Armageddon, the last decisive victory of good over evil. 7th bowl, the final overthrow of the papal power. then comes the harlot on the next page, 17 and 19, which he makes the Catholic Church in contrast with the true church. Well, see, he made the woman back in chapter 12 the true church, and the harlot is the contrast with her. So we had a good woman and a bad woman. The kings are actual kings influenced by the apostate church. Well, did the Catholic Church have some sway over kings? Well, sure. The beast, political Rome, the heads of the beast are the mountains of Rome, represent forms of government. See, we said yesterday that the 7 heads of the beast represented a succession of emperors. Maybe the ones we gave, maybe in a more general sense, we don't know. But anyway, he says, no, they don't represent emperors. They represent a succession of types of government that Rome had. They started out with kings, and then they had consuls, and then they had dictators, and then decemvirs, and military tribunes, and finally emperors. And after the fall was the 8th, which is Christianized Rome under the Roman Catholic Church. Well, the 8th head, if you read carefully in chapter 17, is clearly a bad thing and not a good thing. And he's got it here as Christianized Rome. Okay, that was Hines' review that takes the Catholic, that makes the second beast the Catholic Church and the harlot the Catholic Church. All right, let's go back to Hendrickson, Armageddon. The Valley of Megiddo was the site of many Old Testament wars, just what we've said. This symbolizes the last one of these. Well, that should come as no surprise. Hendrickson finds 7 places where the world comes to an end. You remember that? 7 cycles, chapters 1 to 3 and so on. And so here's another one. Chapter 16 is another one of the end points of world history. So he makes that the last of these battles. And then the 7th bowl is the final judgment at the end of his 5th cycle. The harlot, he says, is the city of Rome, but not a specific city of Rome. The city of Rome representing all evil cities. See, that's the way he's going to take all of these things, very consistent. The city of Rome represents evil seduction of all ages. The kings to whom they send the frogs, all the mighty ones of this earth in every realm, art, education, commerce, these help the beast. Beast, the anti-Christian persecution of successive world empires. The heads of the beast, he makes to be 7 different empires, not all connected with Rome, but he starts with Old Babylon, Assyria, New Babylon, Medes, Persians, Greeks, Rome, and then an 8th represents the final emperor, which is the Antichrist. So we've got a big gap between the 7th one and the Antichrist. Okay, we go back to Wallace, who is going to tie everything to the city of Rome. The Armageddon is going to be the gathering of armies for what? Final overthrow of Jerusalem. Okay. Very consistent. And the 7th bowl, it is done, is the final fall of Jerusalem. And the harlot is the city of Jerusalem. Well, as I said when we were talking about all ago, I have a little problem with that. These characteristics don't fit that too well, I think. The kings of the world, Jerusalem's afflictions from foreign kings, the beast is the Roman Empire. The heads are imperial Caesars, pretty much what we said, starting with Julius. Only he starts with Julius, one before I did. Makes Nero the 6th and Domitian the 7th. And I don't know what he does with Vespasian and Titus there. That would be between Nero and Domitian. Then we come back to Lindsay, Armageddon is this final war. We've had to build up to it during the time of tribulation, the 7 years of tribulation, and now this is the final worldwide struggle over good against evil. And in the midst of it, Jesus is going to return and start his 1,000-year reign on earth. And so the seventh bowl is more destruction from this final worldwide battle. The harlot, he says, are the occult religions of ancient Babylon. After all, the harlot is named what? What's her name? Babylon. Okay? So, this is a reference to occult religions of ancient Babylon. Kings are the nations of the old Roman Empire, but they also represent the new Roman Empire, starting with the European Common Market. The beast is the revived Roman Empire. And the heads are somewhat like Hendrickson said, world empires. Assyria, Egypt, Neo-Babylon, the Medes, Persians, Greek, and Rome is the seventh. And then the eighth is the Antichrist. The eighth is the Antichrist. Okay. Well, you can see how those things, how these different writers follow their theme and are pretty consistent with it. Now let's look at chapter 18. Anybody got a question up to that point before we start 18? We're going to have some time for questions at the end, so be sure you're saving up some. All right, let's go to chapter 18. Chapter 18 describes a city whose name is Babylon. A city whose name is Babylon. Open your Bibles to chapter 18, and let me ask you some questions out of chapter 18. With the coming of this destruction of Rome, the forces that God is unleashing on Rome, chapter 18 describes the response to that. It begins by talking about this angel coming down with great authority, and he yells, "Fallen is Babylon." And here are some of the consequences of the fall of Babylon. Fall of Rome, as I understand it. Now, look through there and see if you see some categories of people that are unhappy, are despondent over the fall of Rome. Who are some of the people that are unhappy over that?
Kings of the earth.
Kings of the earth. So they're unhappy because their great leading city and their king over them has gone down in defeat. And so the governments that have been subordinate governments. He would have been around by then, but you remember Herod the Great. You know, he's a king, but he wasn't the big king. He was just a subordinate king. You see, so they had subordinate kings around, and so the kings of the world are going to be unhappy because Babylon falls. Now, back in 17, it talked about the 10 horns representing 10 kings who eventually would turn against the beast. Some of the subordinate kings took part in the fall of Rome. As they began to see the empire breaking up, they began to see their opportunity, and so they reclaimed their own territory, and they participated in the fall of Rome. But other kings, subordinate kings, were unhappy because they had a close tie with Rome and so on. So the kings are unhappy. Who else is unhappy? Merchants are unhappy. Why would merchants be unhappy?
It's their source of income.
What's happened to trade? I mean, the central point of trade, the big buyer You know, if the United States fell and we didn't buy stuff anymore from all these nations around and weren't running up such a big trade deficit, there'd be a lot of unhappy people in the world, wouldn't it? You see? So it's going to have a major impact on trade when Rome falls. All these, you know, Rome, one of the things that Rome did, one of the really good things Rome did was to build roads all over the empire. And what did those roads do? They promoted trade. And the ships carried goods and all these things. So it was the Pax Romana, the Roman peace that came with the Roman Empire, promoted lots of good trade. And when that goes down, it's going to hurt the merchants of the world badly. Who else is unhappy? Shipmasters, that's part of the trade deal. Shipmasters are unhappy. Who else? Who else is unhappy? Start in verse 21.
Idol worshippers or the
Well,
emperor worshippers, the cult of emperor worshippers?
Yeah, those, but a little more specific here. Look in verse 22.
Idol makers, musicians.
Oh, the entertainers are going to be unhappy. Hollywood is going to be unhappy. Why is Hollywood going to be unhappy? Well, with everything falling apart, who's going to be interested in going to see the entertainment, you know? They can't afford it. Can't pay those big prices anymore. So Hollywood is going to be unhappy, if you understand what I mean by that. The entertainers, the musicians, nobody's going to want their services anymore. Well, see, all of that is simply an elaboration on the effects, the outcome of the fall of this great world city. How long has Rome been the major city of the world? Well, probably since before 100 BC. So now for probably 300 years, 400 years, as long as it's been the United States, you know, that's pretty long, isn't it? It has been the kingpin of the world. Everything has revolved around Rome. The merchants, the subordinate kings, the shipping industry, entertainment, everything has come out of Rome. And when she goes down, boy, it's going to be unhappy times for lots of people. So, chapter 18 is just kind of an elaboration. She went down to defeat at the end of 16. We're just seeing some of the outcomes, some of the results, some of the effects of that under the figure of the city as a harlot. And now speaking of Babylon a little more directly, not any longer through the figure of the harlot, but now more directly as the city named Babylon. And so all these things are taking place. Now, look at the last verse in chapter 18, which tells us again that city was the leader in what? Persecution of Christians. That's who we're talking about. Don't miss it. She was the leader in persecuting Christians. Some have expressed it this way, these aren't the words of the text, but some have expressed it this way, that the blood of Christians was running through the streets of Babylon. That's hyperbole, but that's the picture. That's the picture. And so here is this great city that has been at the heart of the world for 300 or 400 years, going down to defeat. And man, it's going to be a big economic effect, a big effect politically as she goes down to defeat, big effect on those that entertained and did other things, because nobody's going to want their services in this set of circumstances. Now, in actuality, Constantine moved his headquarters from Rome over to Constantinople. Constantinople. See, he renamed the city, which we now call Istanbul. So I believe it was earlier called Byzantium or something. Now, then he renamed it Constantinople. Here's kind of an interesting thing about that, just a sidelight. I suppose the most famous ancient church building is in Constantinople, Istanbul. You know what it's called? It's called the Hagia Sophia. Hagia Sophia. It was built it was begun in the 4th century. Now it has been somewhat destroyed and rebuilt, and what you see today is not the original building exactly, but it is in the location and has some similarities. It's fun to go see. And but it would have been built at a time when Christianity would have been somewhat like we think of it today, as we see the Restoration movement. I mean, it would have some departures, but it would have been, they would have, they would have baptized for remission of sins. I mean, a lot of things they would have done. Here's this huge church building built in Constantinople after Constantine moves the capital city over there. And so Rome has fallen, gone into disuse, gone into disrepair, under attack, and so he consolidates things and goes to Constantinople, and so the Roman Empire sort of, in a very weakened form, continues for a while after he moves to Constantinople. It was in 313 that he signed the Edict of Toleration that officially put an end to the persecution. Diocletian was an emperor that had probably did the worst persecuting of Christians of any of the Roman emperors, and he comes shortly before Constantine. And then Constantine brings it to an end. And there's some controversy over whether Constantine himself became a Christian or whether he just favored Christianity, but anyway, he certainly was favorable toward Christianity. There are those who say that was the death knell of true Christianity when it became the official religion of the Roman Empire. But think of this. Satan, according to chapter 12, Satan said, I'm going to get rid of the church by using the Roman Empire. And before it's all over, the church is the official religion of the Roman Empire. That's just incredible. Absolutely incredible. Okay. 18. The effects of the fall of Rome. Chapter 19. We'll get started on this one at least before our break. Chapter 19. Now, I want somebody to read the first 3 verses of Revelation 19 and put on your thinking caps now. Think carefully. Read it slowly Read it slowly and make connections, okay? Go ahead.
After these things, I heard something like a loud voice of a great multitude in heaven saying, Hallelujah! Salvation and glory and power belong to our God, because his judgments are true and righteous. For he has judged the great harlot, who was corrupting the earth with her immorality, and he has avenged the blood of his bondservants on her. And a second time they said, Hallelujah! Her smoke rises up forever and ever.
Okay. Ring any bells? What do you hear there? Yeah, exactly. Remember back in chapter 6, verse 10, how long before you judge and avenge? Here are those same two words. Hallelujah, because he has judged and avenged our blood. Here's what they asked for. See, that's why I told you when we were going through this, that chapter 6, verse 9, 10, and 11, I think are the key to understanding the book. Because there they ask the question, Lord, when are you going to do this? And chapter 19 says, hey, he did it. He did it. Now, in between those two bookends, a lot has taken place. What's taken place? Well, there's been this time of warning. Some time has gone on. Time of persecution. 1260 days. Lots of Christians have lost their lives. There's been, terrible persecution of the church. But in another sense, there's been a great victory for the church. And now, by the time the forces have been unloosed to bring Rome down to its defeat, the harlot is the first. Kind of interesting. The harlot came up last in chapter 17, and she's the first one to go in chapter 19. Interesting sequence it. So, hallelujah. It's no longer how long, O Lord. It's now, hallelujah. And those early martyrs have been joined by the 144,000 of later martyrs. And they shout, hallelujah. For he has judged the harlot and has avenged our blood at her hands. Okay. That's one of the great moments of the book. Shouting hallelujah. Back in chapter 11, when the announcement was made that God is going to bring it down, they shouted hallelujah. It hadn't happened yet. In anticipation, there was joy. But now, joy because he's done it. He's done it. Now, what event is described next? What comes next in the sequence of events here? What does it say happens next? What event happens next? Marriage feast. Who's getting married?
Saints, the martyrs, to the...
Who's the groom and who's the bride? The marriage of the Lamb. That'd be the groom who is marrying the church, the bride. So there's a lot of speculation about the marriage feast, the marriage. You'll see in a moment different things that have been made of the marriage feast of the Lamb. Obviously, the Lamb is Jesus. Everybody would agree to that. What does this? I mean, it says the marriage feast of the Lamb. Okay, that's what it says. The question is, what does it mean? Well, my judgment is that it means now that the enemy has gone down to defeat, that the celebration can really begin. And that celebration is pictured in terms of one of the great celebratory events of the ancient world, which is the marriage feast. And so, the martyrs who have been through all this difficulty and hardship are now seen as being wedded to Christ as a reward for their faithfulness. We get into trouble in Revelation, in my opinion, if we try to be too specific about some of these figures in terms of afterlife. Okay, it says there's obviously these martyrs have died, and so they've been in heaven for a while. Why, after they've been there for a while, would they now get married to Christ? Well, I think it simply is a figure for saying there's going to be a great celebration. Great celebration. And a kind of a new relationship has developed between Christ and his bride because they've been faithful through these terrible times. And now their enemy's been destroyed, and here is a figure suggesting that they're now going to have great joy together. Okay, so we've got the marriage feast. Now what happens next? Who now rides upon the scene?
A rider on a white horse.
Rider on a white horse. What identifying marks does he have?
Called faithful and true.
He is called faithful and true. Go ahead.
In righteousness he judges and wages war.
He's going to judge. Out of his mouth comes a
Flame of fire.
and a sharp
Sword.
two-edged sword comes out of his mouth. His robe has been dipped in blood, and upon his thigh is written the words,
King of Kings and Lord of Lords.
King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Suppose that's enough clues? Not much doubt about who that is, the rider on the white horse. Now, some have said, okay, if he is the rider on the white horse here, let's make him the rider on the white horse back in chapter 6 when we had the first rider as the seal is opened to us. But as we discussed there, I think that is a mistake to read this back into that because the descriptions are different. There you've got a sequence of 4 horsemen. There the rider is given a crown that has a different word for crown than the word here is, and several others seem factored. So I believe it would be a mistake to try to make those to be one and the same. Here, this rider on the white horse goes forth. Now, who is with him? Who's with him?
Says the armies of heaven.
Okay. And they're further described as
Clothed in fine linen, white.
they're clothed with white linen. They're wearing white robes. Have we heard of those before? The martyrs back in chapter 6, verse 11. Wearing their white robes, and they're riding on horses too. So they ride with him as he goes out in war against 2 enemies. Against whom does he engage in battle? Who's he going after here? Verse 18, 19.
15, he may strike down the nations.
Okay, go ahead down to 19 though. And
The beast.
the beast. He's writing against, he lays hold of the beast and the false prophet, or the second beast, and what does he do with them? Throws them into the lake of fire. Lake of fire. Lake of fire, of course, symbolizes the final place of destruction. That's the final in the sense, once you're there, you can never get out of that. And these are the ones who are said to be thrown into the lake of fire. So Christ goes forth with his armies, ready to lay hold on the dragon, on the beast and the false prophet, defeats them and throws them into the lake of fire. Now, chapter 19 then closes with the defeat of the beast, Roman Empire. And chapter 16 closed with the defeat of the beast, when the earthquake and the hail and the city broke in pieces. So that's why I'm saying that 17, 18, 19 are an expansion upon, an elaboration upon, what just happened in 16. Because the point of the event that marks the end of 16 is also the event that marks the end of 19. The descriptions there of Jesus would make a pretty good sermon, wouldn't they? Who is he? He's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. His robe is dipped in blood. Why? What's that got to do with anything?
His death.
Yeah, in his death he shed his blood, and we benefit from that blood, and he wears the mark of that. Okay? A reminder that he shed his blood. So he's King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He's also Savior, you see, with the blood that he shed for us, salvation of our sins. Out of his mouth comes a sharp two-edged sword. What is the sword that comes out of his mouth? It's the Word of God. The Word of God comes out of his mouth. So he is truth. Another of the words there says truth. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I mean, look at the qualities of Jesus you got here. He's King. He's Lord. He's Savior. He's truth, revealer of the Word. I mean, there's so many things here. The leader of his force. He's the leader of the army. He's the general. Okay? He's the general. We're the army and he's the general. Like he's the head and we're the body and so on. So there are lots of good, a lot of characteristics of Christ revealed here that would make a really interesting sermon to develop. Well, let's advance our PowerPoint a little bit by way of review. Chapter 18 tells more of the city named Babylon, the merchants, entertainers, the whole world will lament her fall. And then she shed the blood of the saints. That city did, Babylon did. And then here comes 19, verse 2. Well, I want you to remember chapter 19, verse 2, and compare it to chapter 6, verse 10. That's a beautiful comparison, I think. For he has judged the great harlot and has avenged the blood of his servants at her hand. So that kind of wraps it up. That lets us see the conclusion of what they had called for. And so we see that comparison between judging and avenging in those two verses. Now, their bookends for the story. Then we have the chapter, we have the rider coming on the white horse. With him are those in white robes, also wearing horses, riding horses. King of Kings and Lord of Lords, robe dipped in blood. He is the Word of God, the truth. So these great characteristics of him are shown. And here's his picture. Our photographer was there and captured the moment. What do you see there? Well, obviously he's riding a white horse. Right here, you can't see the words very well. It's King of Kings and Lord of Lords. See all these following behind him? Wearing the white robes. Sword coming out of his mouth. He is, seen as powerful, majestic, and riding on the white horse going in victory. Now, here's another sermon idea. In what ways, well, let's stop right here. We'll start with that when we come back. I'm going to ask you for the different pictures of Jesus in Revelation. The different ways in which he is pictured. So we'll start with that when we come back. Okay. You asked me the question about the length of this paper. How long is as you tell the storyline, how long should it be? 20 pages ought to be enough, I think. Oh, I was kidding. 15.
I sure hope you can smile.
Is it too late to audit?
Oh, I don't know, a page or two. You can do it. You can do it almost you don't have to write it in paragraph form. It can be almost a list, kind of a sequence of sentences, very short paragraphs or something. So just hit the major events. In other words, you ought to include all the seals, all the trumpets, and all the bowls, and the major characters, and how it kind of plays out. Yeah.
When you say all the, not the right word. When you say all those, do you want to go through and say the trumpets, say the first one represents 1/3 of this, or can you just say the first 4 represent natural
You
descendants?
can say the first 4 if you want to. The first 4, let's take the first 4 trumpets. The first 4 trumpets suggest that God is going to warn the persecutor. It's indicated by the fact that these are only a third and not complete destruction. And they refer to the use of the forces of nature, Then go to the next one. It doesn't have to be long. But what it must do, is have a connected sequence, you see. I want to see the flow of the story. See, this story's got a flow to it. And it begins, you can start in you probably ought to say something about chapter 4 and 5 in the sense that in chapter 4 the story begins with a view of the stage, and God's in control. And then God has in his hand a scroll which represents the first part of the story. Kind of like that. And then Christ in the form of a lamb comes and takes the scroll and begins to open it. Okay, that's chapter 4 and 5. You get the feel now of what I'm talking about? And as Christ opens the scroll, the story begins to unfold. Yeah.
Do we need any why or just the what?
No, you don't have to tell why. This is not a defense of it. It is just, I want you to do something see, what I've tried to suggest to you is it's a story told like this. And I want to know, what is the story?
Just the flow of meaning.
The flow of the
one
story.
thing into
And
another.
you don't have, I'm not talking about including every detail. I'm wanting to see the flow of the story. And what the 10 horns represent, you don't have to tell me. But I want the flow of the story. And that's going to kind of come in 2 parts. You've got, Act 1 and Act 2, and there's going to be a little bit of overlap, whatever. But you'll kind of tell the flow of the story. Okay, let's go now to pick up where we were. and shortly we'll go to our 5-column chart. This was the picture of Jesus on the horse, and then we come finishing the end of 19. We had then he lays hold on the beast and the false prophet, second beast, and throws him into the lake of fire. And fortunately, our cameraman was there again and caught that in this striking picture. You see here is the seven-headed beast falling. Here's the second beast with 2 horns like a lamb falling into the lake of fire. Okay. These pictures, by the way, are available. I bought these from a woman who drew all these pictures. Can't tell you her name right now, but I'll think I will. And so they're available on a disc, and then you can get them and make pictures. She is. Oh, you got it. What's her name?
It's Pat Marvinko Smith.
That's it, Pat Marvinko Smith. She is rather protective of those. When I have 6 lectures. My 6-lesson series on Revelation is on videotape, as it was done about a couple years ago at Memorial Road. And I used these pictures, and we had to pay her $1,500 for the right to use those pictures in that DVD that's put out by 21st Century Christians. So the short version of what I'm giving you here is available on videotape and uses these pictures along the way. And I don't say that. I mean, she should be paid for her work. There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm saying that she is rather protective of it. But I bought it, and she gave me permission to use it when I lecture and stuff like that. But if you're going to republish it in something else, well, obviously she has a right to some recompense for that. But there, you can. How'd you buy yours?
Online.
Online. Okay. She's got a place online, and these are the best, the most accurate drawings I know. Now, there's 1 or 2 of them that I don't use because I think it doesn't quite. There's a little bit about it that isn't quite right, but by and large, I think they're really very good. Very good. Okay, how much did it cost you? $50 something. They're reasonably priced, but not too bad. Okay. Now we've got then the 2 beasts falling into the lake of fire, which is their final demise. And Christ and His army are victorious over. Now, in chapter 19, notice, the first one to go to defeat is the harlot, the city of Rome. They shout hallelujah, you have judged her and avenged our blood at her hand. And then the first beast, the Roman Empire, goes down to defeat, and then the second beast, the cult of worship, goes down to defeat. And so Christ and His army now have been victorious over these 3 major characters. Who has not gone down to defeat yet?
Dragon.
The dragon, Satan. Be patient. We'll take care of him in a minute, but he's the one that hasn't gone down to defeat yet. So, the story of Revelation now has been told. I mean, if it stopped right here, we said it stopped at 16, the story would be complete. At 19, the story would be complete. The persecution and what's going to happen to the persecutor has now been told. So Christ has won, Satan has lost. And of course, the question is, the church survives. Satan did not get to do what he wanted to do. So that's the fundamental message of the book, as I understand it. And what happens in 20, 21, and 22 are sort of epilogue. Now, let's go to our chart and see what is here for the various views. Okay. We're picking up We got through 18 a while ago, so we'll now start at 19. So we're on the top of this one says King's Turn. Somebody asked a question about that during the break, so let me say that again. In the 17th chapter, it says that the 10 horns represent 10 kings who shall, what's the wording there? It's not turn against, what's the wording there that you, on the question you asked me about? Turn against?
The 10 horns which saw and the beast, these will hate the harlot.
Well, hate the harlot, that's it, will hate the harlot. Now, see, as the empire begins to disintegrate from these forces God is going to unleash, some of the vassal kings are going to see the opportunity to regain their territory and not be subject to Rome anymore. And they will break away, and not only will break away, but will participate with those who are trying to bring Rome down to defeat. So that's what I understand the 10 horns to be about. Back in chapter 18, we had some of the subordinate kings were sad, but some of them are glad because they're breaking away, and now they have their own freedom again. Okay, now follow the harlot. In Hines' view, this is the fall of the Roman Catholic Church. Well, that's consistent. He has said that the harlot was the Catholic Church, and now she goes down to defeat. But that is one of the reasons that the Hines view, the history between the first and second comings, is not as popular as it used to be, is because they linked it to all of these events up to the time when this view started, maybe back 1800 or something like that. Time goes on and they haven't got any more events to which to link it. So now, these things keep on going, and there's nothing in Revelation left to tie to it. See, the defeat of the Roman Catholic Church hasn't been defeated yet, and so it comes up to this point, and they say all these things can happen, and then one or two of them haven't happened yet, and there's nothing, no more events to link. So that's one reason I think it is not as popular as it once was. Okay. Marriage feast, he says, is the eternal reward of the saints. That's okay, except I think, see, here's something you may choose to differ with me on, okay? My view of these ending events, starting in 19 and going on through 20, is that they are focused on the heroes of the book. Who are the heroes of this book?
The martyrs.
The martyrs. This is their story. And so they are the ones who ride with the man on the white horse as he goes into victory. They are the ones who celebrate the marriage feast. And when we get to chapter 20 and the 1,000-year reign, I won't give all that away, but they show up again. So, this is their story. It is not an attempt to tell what happens to everybody after they die. See? This is not a treatise on life after death. You can get some of that out of Rich Man and Lazarus. You can get it, in other places about life after death and how the body goes back to dust and the soul lives on. I mean, a lot of this, there are other places the Bible talks about this. But to try to take these descriptions in here in the midst of this treated book that has a focus on these particular people and try to somehow interpret that as what happens to everybody after death, I think is not what was intended here. Not what was intended. So we'll see some more of that after a while. But he says it's the eternal reward of the saints, the marriage feast, and then Christ comes, and he says that's Christ's final coming, the second coming. Not the coming in the sense of destroying the Roman Empire, but the final coming. The armies are the witnesses. or angels or martyrs or all Christians, he wasn't sure. He talks about a supper there for the birds, and that's punishment for the wicked. Okay, so that's the Hines view. Hendrickson didn't say much about the fall of the harlot right there. She's the pleasure-mad world. Marriage feast, Hendrickson says, Christ comes in glory to take his bride, the church. The betrothal, when the church started, as they were betrothed, they were intended to be married, you see, at the beginning of the Christian age. But the interval between the betrothal and the marriage is the Christian age. She was the bride, not the consummated bride, but the prospective bride through the Christian age, and now comes the consummation of that. And so Christ comes for his bride, and so has a feast, and they're married throughout all eternity. So the bride is the church and whatever. And then he says the rider on the white horse is Christ, and this is the second coming. And so the armies are the holy angels, and the supper for the birds. There he talks about call all the birds and come in, and because of all the carnage, and now the birds can come and eat all the flesh and everything in chapter 19. So that's the judgment day, and that ends his sixth cycle, Hendrickson. See, he's gone from first coming to second coming now 6 times. By the time we get into 19, 20, 21, 22 are going to be the 7th cycle. See? Well, he's pretty consistent. I think all the things he makes second coming aren't second coming, but he's got a plan all worked out there, okay? Now, we've got here, we go back now to the view of Wallace, the harlot. Guess who the harlot is in Wallace view? Jerusalem. Here we are again. Okay, so the second beast was Jerusalem, and the harlot is Jerusalem. It seem to be different characters, but he makes them the same thing. And so the fall of the harlot is the fall of Jerusalem is celebrated. The marriage feast is the marriage of Christ. He says that occurs every time somebody's baptized. That's the marriage feast. But how that fits into the storyline of the book of Revelation, I'm not sure. I don't know how you get to that. The rider is Christ leading his forces against Caesar worship and heathenism. Okay, that's not bad. That's pretty good. The armies, the legion of martyrs, and overcomers of persecution. Okay, that's good. The supper for the birds, symbolic victory of the saints over all the persecuting powers. Okay, that's pretty good. So I think on that part, I would be in agreement with it. Then we go back to Lindsay. Lindsay's view of this. The harlot, he says, is Babylon is actually, that the city of Babylon will actually be rebuilt. Now remember, he's going to take a pretty literal view of things. Remember, John didn't see locusts, he saw helicopters. He just didn't know what word to use. But John didn't see a mountain erupting into the sea. He saw an atomic bomb going off. But he didn't know what to call it, so he called it a mountain. And so Lindsay is not always, but whenever he can, he makes it something that is literal for our age. And so he makes Babylon an actual city. Babylon is actually going to be rebuilt, and the harlot moves to Babylon. And the Antichrist comes and destroys both of them. They have a falling out. The bad forces have a falling out, and the Antichrist gets rid of both of them. And then the marriage feast. The church is the bride of Christ, and he comes for the bride at the rapture. The marriage feast is the rapture. Talk about that tomorrow. Christ is betrothed to the church members as they accept him. The wedding feast is on earth at the beginning of the millennium. And the guests are mortals who survive the tribulation and go into the millennium. So the marriage feast is when Christ returns. Then we have the marriage feast. The rider on the white horse is Christ returning for his second coming. Those fighting each other in Armageddon now join to fight Christ, and the suffering of the birds is the result of Armageddon. There's so many people dead that the birds can feast on. Literal birds will feast on literal flesh. Okay. Okay, those are the various views down through chapter 19. And we're ready now to begin with chapter 20. The great battleground book of Revelation, chapter 20. Okay, we need to change our documents there. If you go to 5-2, please. Okay, we begin chapter 20. Have your Bibles open, and I want us to talk our way through this now a little bit. I'm going to ask you questions, and you'll be ready to answer. The first thing that happens, the first 6 verses, in Revelation 20 deal with a period of time called, that lasts for how long? 1,000 years. There are going to be 2 events said to take place for 1,000 years. What are the 2 events that are said to take place for 1,000 years? Satan's going to be bound for 1,000 years, and Christ and those with him are going to reign for 1,000 years. Those are concurrent. I think most everybody would agree those are concurrent events, but they are going to take place. Okay, so we've got 1,000 years, verses 1 to 6, and the binding. The first thing that happens for 1,000 years is the binding of Satan. Okay, let's see now what we've got. I saw an angel coming down from heaven. And what did the angel have in his hands? Key to the abyss, and he had a great chain in his hand. So this angel comes down, he has the key to the abyss and chain in his hands, and he lays hold on the dragon. Who was left? We got rid of the harlot, we got rid of the first beast, we got rid of the second beast. Who's left? What's going to happen to the dragon? See, that's where we are now. What's going to happen to the dragon? So the angel lays hold on the dragon, and he ties him up with a chain, and he throws him in the abyss and locks it over him. And he will be bound in the abyss for 1,000 years. And he won't be released until the 1,000 years is over, and then he'll be released for a little time. Now, I skipped a very important phrase in there. He shall be bound so that he can not deceive the nations anymore. Hang on to that. We're going to come back to that in a minute. Okay. So the first thing that happens is Satan is bound. Now, I got a question for you. Be very careful how you answer this question. Don't jump on the answer too quickly. Has Satan always been bound? Let me rephrase the question. Has Satan always been limited? Oh, that's making it a lot easier then. Okay. Has Satan always been limited? Was he limited in the book of Job? Do anything you wanted to in Job? No, limited. Look at this list of some of the places in the Bible that talks about a limiting or binding of Satan. In Job, God had the upper hand, and he said, Satan, you can go this far with Job, you can't go any further. Satan was limited. In Matthew 12:29, Jesus says, I couldn't cast out demons. In fact, he says, I couldn't cast out demons unless I'm stronger than the guy who's in charge of the demons. And he words it like by saying, I couldn't cast out demons unless I first had entered the house of the strong man and bound him. That is, if I didn't if Satan weren't limited so that I have greater power than Satan does, I couldn't cast out demons. So Satan was under some limits at that time. In Luke chapter 10, verse 17, after the 70 return, Jesus says, I saw Satan falling from heaven. Why? The beginnings of the gospel come out. kingdom of heaven is at hand. And that's going to have a limiting force on Satan as the gospel begins to be preached and Christ begins to be known. And so that's going to be something that puts limits on Satan. That's expressed even more clearly in Colossians 2:15, because by the cross Jesus despoiled the principalities and the powers. Did the cross put limits on Satan? Oh my, yes. The principalities and powers in the heavenly places that Ephesians talks about, the heavenly places, principalities and powers in this spirit world. And the cross despoiled those powers. So that, in the words of Revelation 12:9, the accuser of our brethren has been thrown down. Satan can't be my accuser anymore because my sins are forgiven and he hasn't got any sins of which to accuse me anymore. Well, Revelation 12:9, Satan's cast out. Limits on Satan. We come to Revelation 21:3. Satan is bound again. Are all these bindings the same thing? Do they have all the same meaning? There are people who try to link all these up and make them all one thing. No. Those who hold, for example, that this is the story of Christ from the first coming to the second coming. You see, when Christ came, he bound Satan, and so the 20th chapter of Revelation begins with the coming of Christ, because that's when Satan is bound. As if that's the only time Satan ever been bound. No. Now watch this. I'm about to do something different. Who is this? And who is this? Sometimes it's like this, sometimes it's like that.
God and Satan.
God and Satan, exactly. God, who is always on top?
God.
God's always put limits on Satan. When Christ was on earth, God was exercising more power on earth than ever before, and I think he let Satan have more power on earth than ever before. Satan could do things during the time Christ was here, and that general period that I think he couldn't do before or after, in the way of sending demons into people, things like that. So God was exercising more power on earth, and he let Satan do some things that were exclusive to that time period. But it's always been God on top. What I'm trying to prepare you for is to say that this binding of Satan, in Revelation 20, is not the same thing as Colossians 2:15, where Christ bound Satan by the cross. This one is something else, some other kind of binding, some other limiting of Satan. Now, in what sense does the text say? Reread the text. In what sense does the text say Satan is going to be bound at this binding?
So that he would not deceive the nations any longer.
So he cannot deceive the nations any longer. Now, let's analyze that statement a little bit. Does this mean that Satan is going to be able to do something that he has been able to do before? What does it mean any longer?
That's in his points. He could do that.
Okay, he could do it, and now he can't do it anymore. Now, my suggestion to you as to what that means is this. Prior to this point in the book, prior to the end of 16 or the end of 19, whichever one you want to take, what has Satan been allowed to do? Go ahead.
Use the Roman Empire as his tool.
Use a worldwide coalition of nations to try to stamp out the church. God let him do that once. What is this a promise of?
He couldn't do it until after the 1,000 years.
Okay, he won't let him do it for the 1,000 years. We'll talk about a little time in a minute, okay? It's a promise. I'm not going to let him do that again, at least for 1,000 years. So that he can deceive the nations. What he'd been doing, deceiving the nations into letting Satan use them as a tool. Satan deceived the nations. That's what the whole story is about. Satan deceived the nations. Now, the nations he deceived are gone, and God says, I won't let him do that again. That's the sense in which Satan is going to be bound for 1,000 years. Doesn't mean he can't tempt us anymore. Doesn't mean there will be no persecution. I think it means that there won't be anything on the scale that there was then. In fact, this is kind of an interesting historical point. Since the fall of the Roman Empire, has there ever been anything of its equivalent in world history since? Has there ever been one nation, one empire that encompassed as big a percentage of the world as the Roman Empire did? No. There have been others, the British Empire, and Russia had satellites around and so on, but never has a nation controlled as much of the known world at the same time as the Roman Empire did. I'm not saying that is exactly the fulfillment as possible, but I think it's kind of an interesting title. But God says he cannot deceive the nations anymore. That is, deceive them into doing what Satan has just used him to do. Now, how long is this going to last? What does it say? If that's what it says, there's 1,000 years. What's my next question? What does it mean? 1,000 years doesn't mean 1,000 years any more than dragon means dragon. So what does it mean 1,000 years? Well, compared to other time periods in the book, it would suggest what? Long time. I've sometimes likened this to my balancing my checkbook. When I get down to the end, I put in a figure that's as big as it needs to be to make it balance. So it balances. 1,000 years is as big as it needs to be. Okay? As long as it needs to be to take care of other things that are going on. So it's not literally 1,000 years, but it's a relatively long span of time compared to the other times. Compared to 1,260 days, it's a long time. So it's as long as it needs to be to fulfill the plan of God. So I believe that this means that the first three verses suggest God is going to put limits on Satan. Could God have stopped the persecution way back earlier? Before the Roman Empire even got involved? Could God have done that? Yes. In fact, he had a request to do that, didn't he? Didn't they say, how long, O Master, holding true? Why don't you stop it right now, Lord? I'm going to let it go for a while. I'm going to let Satan have his way about this for a while. Because in the long run, God's going to use it for good. But, so God could have stopped it anywhere he determined, but he let it run its course. Then he says, okay, I'm not going to let him do it. That's what I understand this one to mean. We can talk about what other people have taken to mean then. So, Satan is bound so that he can deceive the nations no more. That's the sense in which he's bound. Always been bound in some way. Always limited in some way. But now limited in this specific way. He can't do again what he just got through doing. Okay. Well, not all the bindings of Satan are the same then. Don't try to parallel all these different bindings Won't parallel this one with Job or this one with Jesus on the cross or something else. Not all the bindings are the same. Here he is bound so he can't do again what he did earlier. Well, fortunately, friends, so he can deceive a nation, can't deceive a worldwide group of nations to try to solve the truth. That's what the sense in which is limited. Fortunately, friends, our cameraman was there again and has caught this picture of Satan being bound, see him tied up with a chain, and the angel, see the chain around the key around the angel's neck. He's about to close the bottomless pit over him and lock him in it. A word about the bottomless pit, or the abyss, as some translations call it. We've heard of that several times in the book of Revelation. And always it is the place where the headquarters of evil, the seat of evil. The locusts come out of the abyss. And so, the dragon has been associated with the abyss before. So it's the place of where evil things come from, and Satan is locked in his own place. He's under house arrest, okay? So that he can't deceive the nations anymore. Not limited in all ways, not in every way, but limited in that way. Okay. Now we've seen what's happened now. God has kept that promise, and there's never again been the kind of persecution by a coalition of nations like there was during the time of the Roman Empire. Okay, we come now to the second part of the 1,000 years. We had 1,000 years, we had 1,000 years of binding, and now 1,000 years of reigning, parallel in time, same 1,000 years. So during the 1,000 years, there will be a binding of 1,000 years, there will be a reigning of 1,000 years, and let's see if we can find out what this 1,000-year reigning is all about. The 1,000-year reign. Okay. Well, look at your text, and let me summarize for you verses 4 through 6. And I saw thrones, and on those thrones were the souls of those who had been beheaded for their testimony and who had not worshipped the beast. And these lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. And others are not going to be raised until 1,000 years is over. This is the first resurrection. Okay. Let's see what we can make of the 1,000-year reign. The 1,000-year reign. Okay. What it says is, the souls of those beheaded with the testimony of Jesus and those who did not worship the beast lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. I want to give you 4 questions to ask about the 1,000-year reign. Now, let me just take time out from that a minute and say a pretty good way to study the Bible is to ask questions of the text. Ask questions of the text. What do you mean? What does this mean? What does that mean? What is this word? What does the connection between those words suggest? Things like that. Not a woman in the congregation, a good friend of mine in the congregation where I attend, emailed me while I'm up here, asking me some questions about 1 John. She was about to teach a class. She was going to teach the class on Tuesday night. And she emailed me on Tuesday afternoon. Wanted to know the answer to her question. And I was up here, and I hadn't checked my email that soon, so I didn't get it till Wednesday night. And so I emailed her back and said, sorry, I couldn't help this time, Marilyn. And she said, well, I'm teaching again in 2 weeks. Tell me by then. So she's got some questions on some word meanings out of in 1 John, the Greek word. Well, I'm not a Greek expert, but I can look it up in the lexicon. So anyway, asking questions of the text. What does the word mean? What's the connection between these 2 words? Do these words mean the same thing or something different? Asking questions of the text. Pretty good way to study. So we're going to ask 4 questions. 4 questions about the 1,000-year reign. First question is, Who? Who is said to reign with Christ? Now you look at the text, and I want you to answer the question for me. What does the text say? How does the text describe? What characteristics does the text ascribe to those who are going to reign with Christ for 1,000 years? Somebody tell me.
They came to life.
Okay? Okay, they're alive, but what do we know about them?
They were killed,
Okay, they have been, how were they killed?
beheaded,
They've been beheaded. Beheaded for what reason?
wouldn't worship the beast.
Wouldn't worship, they were beheaded for their testimony and wouldn't worship the beast. Well, does that ring a bell with anybody? We heard about anybody like that before in the book? About those who held the testimony of Jesus and wouldn't worship the beast? Does that sound like anything we've had before? When did we start hearing about them for the first time?
Chapter 6.
It all goes back to chapter 6, verse 9, guys. I keep telling you that. Chapter 6, verse 9. How long? So those under the altar who are described as those who had been beheaded for their testimony, here they are again, see, beheaded for their testimony. Chapter 7, they're wearing the white robes and they serve before the throne of God. Chapter 14, they are the 144,000 that are on Mount Zion, following the Lamb wherever he goes. Chapter 15, they're gathered around the throne, singing the song of Moses the Lamb, and they're called those who came off victorious to the beast because they wouldn't worship the beast. See the connection? And chapter 19, come to them again. They're riding on the white horses, and they're pictured as those who held the testimony of Jesus. And here they are again. And what did I tell you about the marriage feast? Remember what I said about the marriage feast? Whose story is this? The martyrs. It's the martyr story. And here they are again. It's the martyr story. So who is said to reign with him? The martyrs. The only one said to reign with him for this 1,000 years is the martyrs. Now, if you go to this passage and try to ask what happens to everybody after they die, so you're asking the wrong question of the text. I'm not saying you might not learn a little bit about it, but that's not really what this text is designed to tell us. We'll see in a minute what it's for. But first question is, just let the text tell you who is going to reign with Jesus. And the description is very, very specific. Those who were beheaded, killed, for their testimony of Jesus, and who would not worship the beast. So in sum, we might say that who reigns is the ones who are the martyrs of the Roman persecution. That's who worships. That's the list of scriptures I gave you a while ago. And so the ones who worship are the souls of those who were killed. Now here's an interesting thought. It says souls. Doesn't say I saw the bodies. Now that brings us to the question of what does it mean by first resurrection? This is called the first resurrection. Okay, we're going to use the board again here. Kind of an interesting set of words. So, this is the first resurrection. The first resurrection. Okay, now, back in chapter 3, I can't tell you the verse. Chapter 2, at the conclusion of one of the letters to the 7 churches, it says, "To him that overcomes, he will not be hurt in the second death." The second death. Okay? So the book of Revelation talks about a first death, about a first resurrection and a second death. Now let's ask, what is the second death? What is that? What does that have reference? The second death.
Judgment Day.
Okay. Eternal death. Eternal separation from God. The second death is going to be that death of the soul, if you will, not that it ceases to exist, but the eternal separation from God, the spiritual death, let's call it, okay? This is going to be spiritual death. Spiritual death. Well, by implication, then, what is the first death? If there's a second one, there's got to be a first one. What is the first death? Our physical death, okay? So we've got a first death, would be the bodily death. Death of the body, the physical death. It's appointed unto man once to die. We're all going to die. And so, it's appointed unto man once to die. We all die physically. But we don't all die spiritually. Now, there's two deaths then. A physical death implied by the fact that there's a second death, which is a spiritual death. Eternal separation from God. Now, if there's a first resurrection, there must also be a second resurrection. You wouldn't call something first unless there's something to follow. So, there's a first resurrection, and then there's a second resurrection. Now, nothing is ever called the second resurrection. We have to decide what these are by implication. Well, what do you think is going to be the last of the resurrections?
Resurrection to eternal life.
Okay, Jesus is going to come and raise the dead. 1 Corinthians 15, 26, 1 Corinthians 15, 50, lots of other places. Jesus is going to come and raise the dead. That will be, thus, the second resurrection is the resurrection of the body. The physical resurrection. The second resurrection is the bodily resurrection, the physical resurrection. It's going to happen at the end of time. Over in Revelation chapter 20, verse 14, 15, maybe 12, says, the sea gave up the dead through them, death and Hades gave up the dead through them. What would that be a description of?
Judgment.
Judgment Day, the bodily resurrection that happens prior to judgment. So in Revelation 20, there is a resurrection down at the end of the chapter that is the bodily resurrection. It speaks of death and Hades and the sea giving up the dead through them. Anywhere you can imagine dead people coming from, they're going to come before the throne of God, the great white throne. So that is the second resurrection. It's not called that, but obviously that's what it is. Now, if that is the bodily resurrection, what does that leave the first resurrection to be? Well, think like this. If the first death is bodily and the second death is spiritual and the second death is bodily, what would you think the first resurrection is? Some kind of spiritual resurrection. Because the bodily resurrection is going to happen later on. So what do I take it to mean this is the first resurrection? Well, if it is not the resurrection of the body, it must mean the resurrection of something that is more of a spiritual or figurative kind of resurrection. I think it means that those martyrs who have died are going, there's a sense in which they're going to come back to life. Not the vital resurrection, but their cause revives. There's a revival. There's a rejuvenation. You remember in chapter 11 where it says that the two witnesses were in the streets of the city for 3.5 days, and then they were taken up. So they were dead, and then they were raised. That wasn't the final resurrection, was it? But they came together with Christ in some way. So I believe that this is called the first resurrection does not mean that this is a time when they are raised physically before other people are raised physically. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But rather that it means these people go through an experience that may be called a revival, a regeneration, a renewal that is referred to here as the first resurrection. Okay, so who reigns? The souls of the martyrs. That much we can be sure of. The souls of the martyrs, not described as resurrected bodies, but the souls of the martyrs. Those who were beheaded for their testimony and didn't worship the beast. Now, here comes question number 2. Why do they reign? They're in this condition of reigning with Christ. I mean, think, here you are in Ephesus or Smyrna or Thyatira or Pergamum, and you get this letter from Christ telling you about all these marvelous things. And he says, those who are martyred for me, those who go through the trial of martyrdom, you're going to live and reign with me for 1,000 years. You're going to have something special. And then he begins to put all this in story form. Now, there's one thing on which every expositor of Revelation will agree. We will have differences on lots of things. One thing everybody will agree on, and that is that chapter 20 follows chapter 19. I believe we get unanimous consent on that, don't you? What happened at the end of 19? What's the last thing in 19?
The doom of the beast.
Yeah, the beast goes down in defeat. The persecutor, the enemy, goes down in defeat. Well, whatever event marks the end of 19 is also going to mark the beginning of 20, isn't it? So the beginning of the 1,000-year reign follows immediately upon the destruction of the beast that's been persecuted. What would you do when your persecutor has been destroyed? What do you do when your enemy has been defeated? What's it time to do? Huh? Celebrate, of course. I mean, your football team ever win? Somebody shaking your heads no. I guess you must be from Dallas Cowboys. They're doing better. They're doing better. You celebrate when your enemy goes down in defeat. So what is all of this about? It is Christ's way of saying to the martyrs, you were beheaded for your testimony. You didn't worship the beast. And after that happens to you, I got something really good for you waiting. We're going to celebrate for 1,000 years. I mean, it's a wonderful way to say to them, I've got good things in store for you after you go through the trials. Your enemy's been defeated. It's time to celebrate. And to celebrate. And the 1,000-year reign is a picture. That's what it says. Living in Christ for 1,000 years, what does it mean? It means a big celebration. Who's going to celebrate? We just saw that under point number 1. those who were martyred and would not worship because they wouldn't worship the beast. They're going to have a great victory celebration. So that's the why do they reign. The reign, thus the reign symbolizes their victory and the celebration over their persecutor. That's where it comes in the storyline. So the reign is pictured as this great victory celebration. It's like a resurrection. The cause for which they gave their life survives. They are associated with Christ in victory. It's like a resurrection. What seemed like a defeat has been turned into victory. Like a resurrection. Okay. Now, here's question number 3. Where does this take place? Where does the reign take place? Well, if you read the text, it doesn't say anything directly about where, does it? Does it say it takes place on earth? No. So we have to deduce where the reign takes place. Well, where have these martyrs been ever since chapter 6? In heaven, in the spirit realm. They're sitting on thrones. Every throne mentioned in Revelation, except the throne of the beast, is a heavenly throne. The throne of the spirit realm. Christ has been in heaven since chapter 5, when he came as a lamb. Well, that reminds me, we're going to talk about the different pictures of Christ. Well, I'll come back to that in a minute. Christ has been in heaven. Now somebody says, well, wait a minute. He got on that horse and he rode against the Romans. That was his going back to earth. Well, you mean that was an actual physical battle between Christ and the martyrs who were already dead? And the Roman and the legions of the Romans? He fought them in a physical battle on earth with a sword that came out of his mouth? No, that's not the way. How's he going to defeat him? By natural disasters, armies crossing the Euphrates River, the decadence and immorality. That's how the defeat's going to be. So chapter 19 doesn't picture Jesus riding on a white horse and coming back to earth and engaging in physical battle with the Roman. That's Christ doesn't fight wars like that, does he? So Christ has been in heaven. Thrones have been in heaven. Souls have been in heaven. That certainly would cause us to say that since it says nothing here about this taking place on earth, it must be a reign in the spirit realm. No mention of a reign on earth. So the reign is in heaven. Now, let me say again what I mean by heaven here. By that, we have to be careful about the use of the word heaven. Lots of words have more than one meaning. What does the word cleave mean? The word cleave.
Cling to, hold on to.
Cleave to, okay. A husband and wife are going to cleave to one another, right? What does a butcher use to cut meat?
Cleaver.
A cleaver which separates. So the word cleave can either mean stick together or separate, that's all. What does the word run mean? A simple word. What does the word run mean?
Run.
Run a race, okay?
Or a woman gets in her hose.
Or a run in her hose, okay? Good. Or what are McCain and Obama doing? Running for office. That means they put on their track shoes every morning and they get out and run up and down the street. Well, a little of that, I guess. You ever run a machine? The word run can mean lots of things. Well, we got to have the context to know what it means. What does the word heaven mean? Well, heaven can mean where the birds fly. It can mean the spirit realm. It can mean the eternal abode of the righteous. It can mean lots of things. So we have to be careful when we use the word heaven. I think this means that by heaven, I mean it's going to take place in the spirit. It's going to take place in the spirit. Okay. Now, we're ready then for mentioning that this is not the postponed kingdom of Christ. Now, we're making references occasionally to the premillennial views, and tomorrow we're going to get all that in a package, so we'll put all that together. But those who hold the premillennial view say that this 1,000-year reign is the postponed kingdom of Christ. What do they mean by that? They mean that when Christ came the first time,
God has established the kingdom at sin.
he tried to establish the kingdom when he failed. You haven't got your Hal Lindsey book with you, have you?
Yeah,
You do. Okay, turn to page 30. And about, I hope we're in the same edition, or I'll be giving you wrong information. Page 30, about a third of the way down, and he tells the two purposes Christ had in coming to earth. Is that there?
no, let me look for it.
Must be a different edition of that book. But he says that Christ had two purposes in coming. The first purpose was he was going to be the lamb that was offered for the sins of the world. And the second purpose was he was going to be a king to fulfill the Old Testament prophecies about a kingdom. He was going to establish a kingdom on earth. Well, Lindsay says he got to be the suffering servant that died for the sins of the world, but he didn't get to be the king because the Jews turned him down. They rejected him as king. Well, since he didn't get to be king when he came the first time, those prophecies are unfulfilled. We can't leave unfulfilled prophecies on the books. Therefore, when he comes back the second time, what's he going to have to do? Establish a kingdom. And that's what he's going to do, is come and establish a kingdom. And that will be his, that's this 1,000-year reign on earth, is his fulfilling what he meant to do the first time when he came and didn't get to do it. Well, we'll put all that in its place tomorrow. But I'm suggesting to you that Christ's kingdom was not postponed, that he did what he came to do. And I'm not going to elaborate on that now because we're going to go into that tomorrow. So we'll pass that for the moment. Now, here's question number 4. When do they reign? Now, let's go over the questions. We said, first question was, who reigns? Second question is, why do they reign? Third question is, where do they reign? Fourth question is, when? When does this reign take place? Okay, when does it take place? Well, what do we know? Okay, we know that this reign is a celebration of the defeat of the enemy, which took place at the end of chapter 19. Historically, when did that defeat take place? In what year AD did that defeat take place? 475 maybe. It's not just one event, kind of serious events, but 475 is usually given as the date of the fall of the Roman Empire. So, if this is a celebration of that defeat, then that celebration would begin when the defeat takes place, and so they would begin to celebrate about 475 AD. 475 AD, after the fall of Rome. How long is it going to last? It says 1,000 years. What does it mean? Well, it means that it's going to last while Satan is bound and cannot deceive the nations anymore. It is going to be before the return of Christ and his resurrection. That's his raising people from the dead. It'll be before that. It is going to last virtually until the end of time, separated from the end of time only by what is called
Short time.
the short time, the little time. So it's as long as it needs to be to fill in the time from the fall of the Roman Empire until Christ returns, except for verses 7 through 10. We'll talk about that in a minute, so we won't get into that right now. So, 1 Corinthians 15, 22 through 26. Very important passage in all of this. 1 Corinthians 15, 22 says, I'm going to paraphrase these verses. Christ is the first fruits. In what sense is Christ the first fruits? He's the first one to be raised from the dead, never to die again. Were other people raised from the dead before him? Yes. Lazarus, whatever. But he's the first one raised from the dead in his new body. First one raised from the dead, never to die again. So, he is the first fruits. Then those who are Christ will be raised at his coming. Everybody else is going to be raised at his coming too, but Paul is writing to Christians, and he has that focus. The reason I know that everybody's going to be raised at his coming is because in the next verse it says, because he shall reign until he's put all of his enemies under his feet, and the last enemy to be destroyed is death. And death wouldn't be destroyed if he hadn't raised everybody, would it? See? So, while it says he'll raise those who are his, that's what Paul is talking about, but he raises everybody else too. So when Christ returns, he will raise everybody from the dead. Then what does that verse say next? Then comes the end. After the resurrection of the dead, then comes the end, when Christ shall deliver up the kingdom to God, because he has finished his work. He has defeated all of his enemies, and the last enemy to be destroyed is death. Now I want you to tell me where in there is a place for 1,000-year reign after Christ returns. When he returns, he shall raise the dead. Then comes the end, when he shall start his kingdom that he didn't get to start when he came the first time. Is that the way it reads? Then he shall deliver up the kingdom. Has he been reigning before he returns? Yes. Is he going to reign after he returns? Only in the sense that he'll be reigning with the Father, but the Father takes the superior position, it seems, and reigns after Christ returns. We're going to talk tomorrow about some more of that, about the kingdom and what the kingdom means and all those things. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But the point here is that those who say that this is a 1,000-year reign on earth that takes place after Christ returns have no good explanation for 1 Corinthians 15, 22 through 26, which says, when he returns and raises the dead, then comes the end, when he shall deliver the kingdom back to God. And Revelation 20:11 talks about how all the dead are going to come from Hades and the sea and death and all those things and stand before the throne of God. So in Revelation 20, the place of the resurrection of the dead is in verse 11, not back here in verse 3 through 6. Okay. Now have you got the four questions? Have you got the four questions? Say them with, I want you to repeat them with me good and loud, friends. You're not very good at this. I want you to do better this time, all right? The first question is, who reigns? Once more, the first question is, who reigns? The second question is, why do they reign? The third question is, where do they reign? And the fourth question is, when do they reign? Now, if you'll let the text answer those questions for you, I think you'll whip this question. I think you can sit down with somebody who's concerned about 1,000-year reign and say, well, let's look at the only passage There's only one passage in the Bible that talks about the 1,000-year reign. Only one. It's only mentioned one time in the Bible, in the midst of a highly figurative passage. Let's take those 3 verses, 4 through 6, and let's read them together and ask these questions. Who does it say will reign? Why will they reign? Where does this come in the storyline of the book? Where will they reign? Well, it's about souls and heavenly thrones and all this stuff. Nothing said about on earth. And they're going to reign after the fall of Rome and until Christ returns, except for the little boy. Okay. Now, let's move on to the little time. We've now seen that the first portion of Revelation 20, the first 6 verses, talks about the 1,000-year binding and the 1,000-year reign. The 1,000-year reign is symbolic of the victory of the martyrs over Rome, the persecutor, not a 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth. It's my understanding of the passage. Okay. Now, here comes the next part. We've talked about the first 6 verses, the binding and the reigning. Now here comes part 2. There are 3 parts to this chapter. First part is the 1,000-year part. The second part is the little time part, verses 7 through 10. And so we're going to talk about that now. Verse 3 says Satan is loosed. After the 1,000 years is over, he's going to be loosed. And what do these verses say he's going to do? Back to 7 through 10. What does it say Satan is going to do?
Save the nation.
Now he's going to deceive the nations. At least he's going to try. And he begins to gather his forces, and what does he do?
Surrounds the saints.
Surrounds the camp of the saints. Okay? Satan's loosed. And he begins to gather his forces. And before any harm is done, before anything happens, I mean, it doesn't say anything bad about Christians or anything happening. Then fire, God strikes him with fire from heaven and casts him into the lake of fire, where he shall be tormented day and night, forever and ever. Who did we see earlier that went into the lake of fire?
The beast and the false prophet.
Beast and the false prophet. Matthew chapter 25, maybe verse 42 or 3, talks about that God has prepared a place for the devil and his angels. Remember that? Here it is, the lake of fire, prepared for the devil and his angels, where he shall be tormented day and night, forever and ever. Now, what does this mean? We don't have a lot of clues to go by. This is not like figuring out who is the beast. We're not given many clues. So I don't have a lot of insight about the little time. Let me offer a proposal to you about it. This is about as good as I know how to do. God has had Satan bound in the abyss for 1,000 years. But that's not the place prepared for the devil and his angels, is it? So God has to get him out of the abyss over into the lake of fire, the place prepared for the devil and his angels. Now sometimes we read about prisoner transfer. So prisoners are being transferred from this prison to that prison, and while they're in the process of transfer, they break out, they break loose, they overpower their guards, and they get out. It seems to me here we've got a description of the transfer of the prisoner. Satan's the prisoner. He's held in one prison over here, which is the abyss. God wants him over here in the lake of fire, which is his permanent abode. So God lets him out over here. Now the question is, did that 1,000 years of binding change him any? Did it make him have a different view of the church? Does he come out and say, I repent? Does he come out and say, you know, I've learned a lot during this 1,000 years. I tried to defeat the church and it didn't turn out too well, and I've learned my lesson. Is that what's going on here? What does this description tell us? What does he want to do? Start it all over again. See? Going to gather his forces, and off he goes after the church again. Surround the camp of the saints. Never says he harms the church. Never says how far he gets with that intent. Tells us enough to know he hadn't changed any. And apparently before any harm comes, the Lord strikes him with fire and sends him into the lake of fire, where he'll be tormented day and night forever and ever. Now, some take this to mean that there will be a great persecution of Christians right before the end of the world. Why am I going to say I do not believe that is the meaning of this passage?
Doesn't say it.
Nobody ever knows.
Doesn't say it? And what else? What did we talk about last time?
They could deny.
It's going to come like a thief. If there's going to be a great persecution just before the end of the world, what have we got? The sign. Don't believe there's going to be any sign. So, we have here then, I believe, part of the storyline. Think, guys. Part of the storyline. He's in one place, but that's not where God wants him at the end of the story, and so he's got to let him loose from here to put him over there. And in the process, Satan shows, I haven't changed any. I'm the same old devil I've ever been. And so God says, yeah, but not this time. And he zaps him with fire from heaven and throws him into the lake of fire. Now, how long is a little time? How long does it take to be a little time? 30 minutes? A day? A year? 10 years? 50 years? I don't know. There's no suggestion about how long it is. So he begins to try to mount his forces. I understand that. That's his intent. How far he gets with that, I don't know. But to me, it is simply a way of saying Satan hasn't changed any. He's the same mean devil he's always been. Still wants to do harm to God's people, the church. Would do it again if God gave him the chance. God's not going to let him get very far with it this time. And then sends him into the lake of fire. Now, there may be better explanations in a little time than that. I'm not offering that as a real good one. Okay? I don't, there's not enough there to go on. So, I'm just telling you what the best thing I have come across, the best thing it seems to me, as a way of explaining the little time. I don't think our inability to fully grasp the little time means we ought to change our whole view of what the book of Revelation is, okay? So that's about the best I can do with the little time. Okay, we come now to the last part of chapter 20, verses 11 through 15. Verses 11 through 15. Oh, I forgot to show you the picture of Satan going into the lake of fire. There he goes. Goodbye. All right. Now we're ready for the last part of chapter 20, the judgment. We had the 1,000 years, part 1, the little time, part 2. The third part is the judgment, verses 11 to 15. Which goes something like this. This is, again, a paraphrase. He says, and I saw a great white throne, and him that sat upon it. And I saw the dead, the great and the small, standing before the throne. The sea gave up the dead that were in it. Death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them. And the dead were judged. Then a book was opened, and the dead were judged out of the things written in the book, every man according to his works. Another book was opened, which is the book of life. And if any was not found written in the book of life, then he was cast into the lake of fire. That's kind of the short version of those verses. Okay. What shall we make of this? Okay. I saw a great white throne and him sat upon it. Who would you think that represents?
Christ.
You know, this is really interesting. Is Christ or is God going to be the judge in the last day?
Christ.
They're both mentioned as judges in the last day, actually. I don't guess that should be any problem for us. They are one, aren't they? So we don't know. I mean, I don't know exactly how to resolve that issue. I think the one seated on the great white throne here probably represents the Father. But Christ is said to judge. God is said to judge. And so somehow they collaborate in this judgment. So I saw a great white throne and him that sat upon it, from whose face the heaven and the earth fled away. All the elements are gone. The earth and the heavens are gone, aren't they? 2 Peter 3, the elements, all this will melt with a fervent heat. So, you know, there are those who say, well, 144,000 go to heaven, and everybody else will have their eternity on earth. Don't think so. Because the heaven and the earth are gone. The present existence, present physical universe is gone. Now, how many are there? I tell you what, let's do for fun. Let's prepare a sermon on these verses. And let me ask you this question. And the answers you give me to this question are going to be the main points of the sermon. Okay, you got it? What is before we get to the words, what is the central theme of these verses? What is this a description? Judgment. Final judgment, okay? So our sermon is going to be on the final judgment. Final judgment. Now, I want you to give me some words which flow out of the text. Not words that are in the text, but words that flow out of the text. Just one word, I mean, one word descriptions. One word descriptions of what that judgment is going to be like. The qualities of the judgment. This final judgment is
Inevitable.
okay, inevitable. Now we may come up with more words here than you want to use in the sermon, so let's throw out any words we want to. We may decide in the end that some of these we'll use and some we won't. That's a good word. It is inevitable. You can preach pretty good about that. This judgment is inevitable. What's another word you might use? Complete. Or let me change that. Universal. Let's use the word universal. This word is this judgment universal because why?
Everyone will be dead.
Everybody will be there. Death and Hades and sea, everywhere you can imagine dead people coming from, they show up. This judgment is universal. It is universal. What's another word we could use to describe this judgment? One word descriptions. We're going to make this sermon have good parallelism, okay? It is inevitable. It is universal. It is what?
Awesome.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. It is fearful.
Yeah.
It is fearful. Okay. It is awesome. It is fearful. What else? What's another word? I mean, we're going to be there before this great judge of the whole world. It's awesome.
Standard.
What?
Standard. There's a standard.
Okay. Maybe we could use the word fair. Would that be okay? I think that's kind of what you're getting at. There's a standard by which we judge, and that's a fair standard. The judgment is fair. You're judged by what you've done. Is that fair? I don't want it, but it's fair.
And go back here.
Final. Good. Yes. Judgment is final. That's very good. This is a final judgment. We might throw in another word kind of like that. It is absolute. There's no appeal, is there? I mean, which higher court would you go to, friends? It is absolute. It is final. Any other words you think of? There's one group we haven't covered yet that we've got to cover. Those whose names are written in the book of life. What kind of judgment will it be for them?
Fantastic.
Yeah, how about that?
We're all thinking with the F's here.
Those whose names are written in the book of life have a different outcome, which is based on it's not based on their deeds, see, in the sense that their sins have been forgiven. The bad deeds are gone, see, their bad deeds are gone. How about the word gracious? It'll be gracious. For them, it's gracious, Jeff. It's gracious. Well, okay. You see what we're doing, okay? We're looking in the text, and we're looking for words that flow out of the text that describe the nature of this judgment. And you can make a pretty good sermon out of that. Pretty good sermon. Okay, now let's look back at the text a little bit and go through it in a little bit more detail here. God judges, seated on the great white throne. All the dead are there. He gave up the dead were in it. Death and Hades gave it. I don't suppose that is anything except to be sort of hyperbole to say from wherever you can imagine dead coming, they're going to show up. There's no place where dead people will still be. They'll all be given up. Now, we can discuss at length, well, I thought everybody who died went to Hades, and I did too. But somehow, just to make the point, kind of overstatement, death and Hades and sea give up the dead to them. Okay. The judgment is based on works. How many of you want to have all the things you've ever done or thought or said displayed on that great video screen in the sky in front of everybody who ever lived? Does that sound like a good deal to you? Does not sound like a good deal to me. That's what we got right here. The dead are judged according to works. Everybody judged according to his works. Well, we don't want to be judged according to our works. That's not going to get us where we want to be. If we're going to be judged according to our works, and that's all. But there is another factor than the book of deeds. There's also another book. Some are written in the book of life. Some people's names are in a special book. Some names are in a special book. Now, it's really interesting to look at the use of the term book of life throughout the scriptures. It starts occurring earlier than you might think. Let's look. Here is the first time in the Bible it occurs is back in Exodus. Exodus 32:33. Whoever has sinned against me, him will I blot out of my book, God says. Way back in Exodus, God is keeping a book of those who are his people. And what do we learn? What do we learn by looking at that verse?
Have your name written in the book, and then sin and have it taken out.
Okay? Those whose names are written can be taken out. And it's going to be surprising as we go through this list how many of the verses talk about being blotted out. This is not very good news to those who believe once saved, always saved, is it? So who sins against me, him will I blot out of my book. Psalm 69:28. David says of his enemies, let them be blotted out of the book of life. First two times it's used, it's about blotting out. Psalm 69:28. Well, here's another verse. This is found in the New Testament now, Luke chapter 10, verse 20. Jesus says to his disciples, rejoice that your names are written in heaven. Who's going to be in that book? Well, Jesus' disciples are going to be in that book. Rejoice that your names are written in heaven. Philippians 4:3, Paul talks of his fellow workers whose names are in the book of life. That's pretty good. Fellow workers. Workers in the kingdom. Their names are in the book of life. Hebrews 12:23 speaks of the church of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven. The church of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven. I guess Christ would be the firstborn probably here. So those who are in his church are enrolled in heaven. Then we come to the occurrences in the book of Revelation. Revelation 3:5. One of the seven churches of Asia, he says, we went back in it quickly then. It's Revelation 3:5, if you're writing those down. Talks about that to him that overcomes, there's our Nike word again, to him that overcomes, I won't blot him out of the book of life. I said that one night, and there was a guy in the audience who emailed me the next day. He was not a member of the church. Said I was misusing that passage because it didn't say that because I'd made the point that you could be blotted out. And he says, well, but it doesn't say that everybody who sins will be blotted out. It doesn't say that you have to be blotted out and so on. And you begin to try to use some syllogisms on it. And I said, well, wait a minute. The syllogism you build on this one is called if and only if. If and only if I'm faithful, I will not be blotted out. If and only if. It would make no sense for Jesus to say, well, if you're unfaithful, you'll be blotted out, but you can't be blotted out. What sense would that make? But if and only if you are faithful, will you not be blotted out? So, another Revelation 13:8, whose name has not been written in the book of life of the Lamb. Oh, here's a new feature. It's the book of life of the Lamb. Why would it be the book of life of the Lamb?
He provides life to those.
You can't get in it without the blood of the Lamb. Exactly. You can't get in it without the blood of the Lamb. The book of life of the Lamb. Even those in the Old Testament, how are they cleansed of sin? Hebrews says that his blood worked backwards as well as forwards, doesn't it? Okay? Also in Revelation 17:8, whose name has not been written in the book of life. speaking of the enemies of God. Their names were never written in. Revelation 21:27, those who go into the holy city, the New Jerusalem, only they that are written in the Lamb's book of life. There's a good expression, in the Lamb's book of life. Lamb's book of life. Now, from all this, what have we learned about being written in the book of life? Well, throughout the centuries, God has kept a list of those who are His. Old Testament, New Testament. God has been making a list, checking it twice. Going to find out who's not in. I guess that's not actually in the Bible, is it? But that's pretty close. Pretty close. Pretty good idea. Now, when I'm preaching on this, I make this point. There are only three possible conditions that one may be in relation to the book of life. Now, you tell me what they are. Only three possible conditions. What are they?
In, out, or remove.
That's about as good as I can put it. Never been written in. Been written in, blotted out. Been written in, still there. Okay? That's about it. Those are the only three. Never been written in. Well, what's going to happen to those who are never written in? They don't have the Lamb's blood to cleanse them, do they? Never been written in. Written in and blotted out. They were in, and so had the opportunity for salvation, but have done what it takes to be blotted out, and therefore have no longer have that blood of Christ to cleanse them. Or they're written in and still there. Now, let me ask you this question. Every time I sin, am I blotted out?
Live in that sin.
Say again?
We continue to live in that sin.
Okay. Yeah, there's a difference between sinning and living in sin. No. 1 John 1:7. If we walk in, notice this carefully. If we walk in the light as He is in the light, the blood of Jesus keeps on cleansing us from our sin. Walking in the light doesn't mean not ever sinning, does it? Walking in the light means I've stumbled and I've fallen down, but I do what it takes to get up and go on. John tells us in that passage it's confessing our sins, repenting and so on. So if we walk in the light as He is in the light, the blood of Jesus keeps on cleansing us from our sins. But in the previous verse, he talks about walking in the darkness. See, I can walk in the light, and I can sin, I can tell a lie, and then I straighten it out. I can do something that's sexually immoral. I can repent and change and do as much as I can to undo it. I can sin and still be walking in the light. But if I keep on sinning and don't care, I keep on sinning and make no effort to correct it, I keep on sinning and make no amends to anybody, no repentance, then I leave the light of the darkness. Now, I would, this is kind of off the subject, but let me, I would suggest to you there are four possible conditions. I would base this on, what is it? Is it 1st or 2nd Peter 2 that talks about the dog returning to his vomit and all of that? 2nd Peter chapter 2, okay. This is kind of based on that. It says that the one who has been cleansed and returns to his sin, his last state has become worse than the first. You remember that? So let's talk about that a minute. So possibility number one is you've never been cleansed with the blood of Jesus. You're over here in state number one. You've never been cleansed. You've never been written in the book of life. Okay? Put it in those terms. You've never been written in the book of life. Why? Well, you've never obeyed Christ. You've never had His blood cleanse your sins. You've never believed and repented and been baptized in sins. So, on what basis would you think you've been written in the book of life? the Lamb's Book of Life, if you haven't submitted to the Lamb. Okay? So here's the Lamb's Book of Life. You've never been written in. State number 2, you've been written in, and you're still there. You've been written in, you're walking in the light, you're staying in the light, you're doing what's right, and you're making mistakes, but when you do, you're aware of it, and you correct it, and so you're taking advantage of the second law of pardon as you confess and repent and pray and so on. Okay, so you're walking in the light. State number 2. State number 3 is, as Peter says, you have been washed, and then you return to wallowing in the mire. Okay? I would call that being blotted out. Being blotted out. So you've been blotted out. You're back to wallowing in the mire. And your last state has become worse than the first. You're worse off than if you never heard of the gospel in the first place or never obeyed the gospel in the first place. You're worse off. Now, how God's going to handle all these degrees of reward and punishment, I don't know. You're worse off, he says, worse off than the first. I believe a person can come from state 3 back to state 2. I know people who've been, I think, blotted out, lived a sinful life for a good many years, and then come back to the church, don't you? But the Bible teaches there's still another state over there. A state from which you cannot repent. You remember that? Like Hebrews chapter, what is it? Chapter 6. Hebrews chapter 6 talks about those who put Christ to an open shame, and there's no repentance for them. They've reached the point of no return. I think you can stay in this state, number 3, of being blotted out so long and become entangled in sin so deeply that you don't, it's not that God, you've done a sin so bad God can't forgive it, it's that your conscience is so seared that you have no mechanism to come back. What would cause you to come back? You have ignored your conscience for so many times, you've been asked 1,000 times to change and you haven't, and you get over here to this state where you're so close to Niagara Falls, you're going to go over. You just can't, there's nothing going to stop it. And I believe that's what the Bible teaches is kind of the sin against the Holy Spirit. When Christ talks about the sin against the Holy Spirit of those who accused him of casting out demons by the power of Beelzebub, you remember that? He says, look, if you're so far gone that you can't tell the difference between right and wrong, you can't tell the difference between the Son of God and the devil, you're so blinded, you can't tell the difference, you ain't got a chance. And we can stay over here so long that we don't distinguish right and wrong anymore. Now, if this is correct, if this is a correct analysis, what does it tell us? It says, okay, I don't want to stay in state number 1, that's for sure. I haven't got a chance there. So I need to obey Christ and become one of his, baptized into Christ, written in the Lamb's Book of Life. And I want to sin as little as I can. I want to follow him as well as I can. And if I make a mistake, I want to repair it as quickly as I can. If I get to the point where I've become weak, quit going to church, I've gotten involved in pornography and other things that are bad, I've got to wake up and get out of that before it's too late. Because there can come a time when I'm so entangled in sin I won't ever come. Now, the Bible doesn't exactly talk about it in those 4 terms in one passage, but so I'm kind of putting together some stuff, but that's kind of how I read Book of Life. Never written in still there, written in blotted out and can't ever get back in. You study on that a while. I may need some help on that, okay? But you think about that and see if that's how the Scriptures line up for you. Okay, so we're talking about God has kept this list of those who are his. these will be approved in the final judgment. And so we are, the wicked go into the lake of fire, the last verse of chapter 20, where they'll be, where the devil is and where the two beasts are. The wicked go into the lake of fire. Let's pause a moment on the lake of fire. Lake of fire. Is there really going to be a fire? You know, some translations talk about this being like molten sulfur. Is it really going to be a lake of fire? I mean, literally a lake of fire? What it says. What does it mean? Well, Jesus talks about a place of outer darkness. How can you have outer darkness and a fire at the same place? So what have we got here? Well, we've got figurative expressions trying to convey to us something of what hell is like. Have you ever been in total darkness? I mean, it's scary and it's lonely and it's fearful. And that's conveyed by outer darkness. A lake of fire. What is more painful than being burned? You know, I mean, it's a way of suggesting to us the terrible ordeal, the terrible pain and anguish of eternal separation from God. So let's don't think in literal terms here. Let's think in terms of what this is intended to mean. Well, I guess we're going to take our break here. In fact, we may be a little past our break, but let's take a break for a little while, and then we'll come back and finish out our study for today.